3, 2, 1.
Good evening. Welcome to the November 5th City Council meeting. I am Gina Louise Shara, and I will be presiding this evening. This meeting and all who participate in it with us on Zoom will be audio and video recorded. We're going to begin, as always, with public comment. If you know that you wish to make a public comment, please use the raise hand feature. To raise your hand, you click on the participants in your horizontal menu bar at the bottom of Zoom, and a column should open up that lists all the participants of the meeting. The raise hand feature is at the bottom of that column. If you are calling in by phone, you can raise your hand by hitting *9. If you're having trouble raising your hand, you may use the chat feature to send a message to me. I'll do my best to monitor those messages for people having technical difficulties, but that's the only purpose for which we'll use that function, and it'll only be used during public comment. I will unmute each raised hand one by one and ask if you'd like to make a comment. When you begin, please state your name and your city or town for the public record. To ensure everyone has an equal opportunity to speak, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, I'll ask you to please finish your sentence. According to the rules of the council, we do not respond during public comment, as it's your time to speak. So while your comments should be directed to us, the council, you'll understand when we don't respond. You may speak on any topic. It doesn't need to be an item on the agenda. Due to the size of the meeting, that it's public, and how Zoom works, all participants will need to be muted until called upon. I also ask that all but the council turn off your video until called upon, as comments are directed to the council and only the person recognized has the floor. We'll do our best to act quickly if someone is clearly acting in a way that's inappropriate, deploying profanity or slurs, or displaying something outside of what one would expect in council chambers. And I'll remove anyone that needs to be removed from the meeting. If you don't wish to make a comment, we ask that you watch on Channel 15 or by streaming on Northampton Open Media through their YouTube channel or their other platforms. The recording of this meeting will be available at Northampton Open Media's Government Video Archive channel on YouTube, and we thank them as always for providing that. I'll remind people we're always happy to receive comments by email, which are equally part of the public record, so please email us at citycouncil@northamptonma.gov. So we are going to start with public comment, and the first hand I see is Jennifer McKenna.
Thank you so much. Are you ready for me?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
All right, good evening. I'm Jennifer McKenna. I live in Leeds, and I'm speaking in support of the Roe Act resolution. I wanted to thank Councillors Ciara, Maori, and Dwight for your fierce leadership in offering this resolution in support of strengthening abortion rights in our state. At this moment in our country, your leadership from the local level is critical and powerful for multiple reasons. First, your official statement of local support for proactive abortion policymaking is enormously important for state reps and senators supporting the Roe Act. This resolution publicly demonstrates we have their backs. Second, it's an official assertion of our local community's stake in state policymaking about abortion, which has a direct impact on individual people's lives, families' economic security, and the health of local communities themselves. Third, this resolution helps chip away at abortion stigma, which is so deep and pervasive in this country, by saying abortion out loud and creating a public space for community members to talk about their abortions and expose misinformation, disinformation, and myths. And finally, your resolution is a vehicle for educating community members about the significant abortion barriers still on the books in Massachusetts, which are medically unnecessary, harm people's health and economic security, and disproportionately impact communities of color, vulnerable youth, and people with low incomes. I especially appreciate that this resolution addresses the impact of COVID-19 in exacerbating the harms and inequities caused by barriers to abortion in our state. Getting rid of my phone. The Roe Act is actually a critical public health response to the coronavirus. Instead of passing it, our lawmakers have left barriers to abortion care in force that are making countless pregnant people in Massachusetts risk avoidable exposure to the virus and even travel out of state during a pandemic for essential healthcare. Leaving these barriers in place undercuts all our state leaders and essential workers are doing to control the spread of this deadly virus. And as always, those most harmed, people of color, women in abusive relationships, vulnerable youth, and those with limited resources, now including the large number of Massachusetts people who have lost their income due to the pandemic. Failure to pass the Roe Act and remove these barriers is unnecessarily endangering lives while privileging the political agenda of a minority over the health of us all. As you well know, during the last 2 years of state inaction on the Roe Act, the federal administration and bench have further dismantled our reproductive health rights and further institutionalized misogyny and white supremacy. And that's about to get worse. In short, it's long past time we passed the Roe Act. Thank you so much for this new resolution, urging our legislature to do it now. And thank you for giving a visual voice to the majority in our community who respect our right to make our own decisions about our bodies, our lives, and our futures. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Whoops. Next, we have Lindsay Sabadosa.
Good evening. Thank you to the Northampton City Council for allowing me to speak briefly here this evening, and to Councillors Chiara, Maori, and Dwight for their work on this evening's further resolution in support of the Roe Act. I'm grateful to the Council for this work and for your continued, passionate, loud support for reproductive freedom. In recent days, in the last 48 hours in particular, we have been reminded that democracy requires patience. The legislative process is no different. However, the Roe Act is a bill that requires us to be impatient. Abortion is not a procedure that allows for delay. It cannot be postponed. And so every single day we delay in passing the Roe Act, there are those who suffer because of our inaction. It is particularly poignant during this pandemic. With travel bans in effect, patients who have needed to have a procedure after 24 weeks have been required to travel to Colorado, New Mexico, Maryland, or Washington, D.C. during a pandemic to obtain health care, taking risks that were completely and totally unnecessary had they just been allowed to receive that same care right here in Massachusetts. Minors who have used judicial bypass have had to explain to a judge via Zoom whether they are mature enough to parent or to have an abortion. During times of incredible economic insecurity and significant unemployment, patients have had to figure out how they can afford a procedure that starts at $700 and only goes up after the first 8 weeks. All of this could be resolved with the Roe Act. And right now we have a commitment from the legislature, from the Speaker and from the Senate President to take up a bill that protects reproductive freedoms. In the House, we have arrived at that point thanks to the outpouring of support, and I won't lie, the little girls in their RBG sweatshirts reminding us all that discrimination on the basis of sex is discrimination, and restrictions on access to healthcare based on one's reproductive organs is also discrimination. Your action and support of this legislation this evening, however, are still deeply necessary because we cannot just pass a bill that protects reproductive freedoms. We must pass a bill that includes all the provisions of the Roe Act. We must put the right to abortion in state law, remove judicial bypass, allow for abortions after 24 weeks in the case of lethal fetal diagnoses, update the outdated medically inaccurate language from our state law, and establish safety net coverage for abortion for people who don't have health insurance, because care you cannot afford is not health care. With your support and a loud chorus of voices demanding that Massachusetts lead, we can do more than just pass a bill. We can pass the Roe Act and ensure that no one ever has to jump over hurdles to get the care that they want and need. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Though you need no introduction, could you please state your name and city or town for the record?
Absolutely. My name is Lindsay Sabadosa, and I reside here in Northampton. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Cara McElhone.
Good evening. My name's Cara McElhone. It was close. I'm speaking in regards to order number 20.135. I'm the executive director of the Children's Advocacy Center of Hampshire County. Let me begin by saying how grateful we are for the city of Northampton and Smith folks' many years of support. Thank you for partnering with us to help kids get the safety, healing, and justice that they deserve. Someday, I hope an organization like ours would not need to exist, but for now, we do. Because 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused before they turn 18 years old. 1 in 5 kids is sexually solicited online. And in Massachusetts, 84% of perpetrators are someone that child knows, trusts, and loves. Most kids never tell anyone about the abuse, but we're here if and when they're ready to share their stories. The Children's Advocacy Center of Hampshire County, the CAC, coordinates care for kids as they navigate the process of disclosing abuse. The CAC model is one that's used around the country. To better understand what a CAC is, you must understand what a child would face without one. Without a CAC, the child may end up having to be taken to multiple locations to tell the worst story of their life over and over again. Instead, a child comes to the CAC, a safe, child-focused environment, and tells their story once to a trained interviewer. In an adjoining room, a multidisciplinary team of professionals, child welfare workers, police, prosecutors, advocates, and more, gather to learn what happened and to make a plan for that child. A central tenet of the CAC model is to offer a safe, child-friendly space that mitigates any additional trauma kids may face when they're able to tell their story. The house on Elm Street provides comfort and privacy for children and families. We have an on-site medical suite for necessary exams. We have a team observation room and closed caption cameras to record interviews of abused children, as well as a welcoming reception area for kids and families. We've been able to provide this safe space thanks to the many years of support from Smith Voc and the City of Northampton. Since moving into the house on Elm Street in 2006, the CAC has helped more than 2,000 abused kids in our community. All of our services are free of charge and provided to children for as long as they need them. For a long time, we were a very small organization with only one part-time employee. And over the past few years, we've grown and now have 3 employees at the house every day. We have advocates who specialize in helping kids regardless of prosecution, and 1 staff person who focuses on online safety and child trafficking. We provide programming and training to schools, community centers, religious organizations, physicians, therapists, first responders to make Hampshire County safer for kids. We envision the CAC house to be a hub of child safety in Hampshire County. We hope to be able to purchase the house and provide a permanent home for the Children's Advocacy Center at 593 Elm Street. Owning the house takes us 1 step closer to ensuring sustainability and fulfilling our promise to abused kids that we will be here when they need us for as long as they need us. And we need your help to take the next step. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Cara. Next, we have Carrie Baker.
My name is Carrie Baker, and I live in Northampton, Massachusetts. I'm a lawyer and a professor at Smith College, and I'm the president of the Abortion Rights Fund of Western Massachusetts. I come before you today to urge you to pass a resolution in support of the Roe Act. With the passing of women's rights icon, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and the confirmation of Trump's appointee, Amy Coney Barrett, to fill Ginsburg's seat on the Supreme Court, federal constitutional protection for the right to abortion health care is at imminent risk. With Barrett, conservatives have consolidated a 6-3 supermajority of justices who are unanimous in their hostility to abortion rights and the Roe versus Wade precedent. And without Democrats as a majority of the Senate, we will not be able to pass affirmative protections for abortion rights in Congress. Therefore, the Massachusetts legislature must act now to secure the right to abortion health care in the state. The Roe Act would protect and strengthen abortion rights in Massachusetts and remove several medically unnecessary restrictions that are forcing pregnant people to travel out of state for this essential health care during this pandemic. Rigorous longitudinal research proves that restricting access to abortion harms people's health. A team of researchers led by Dr. Diana Green Foster provided definitive evidence that abortion access strongly enhances women's health and well-being, whereas denying abortion causes physical and economic harm. People who accessed the abortion care they wanted had better physical and mental health outcomes, were more financially stable, set more ambitious goals, were more likely to find a good romantic partner, were more likely to have a wanted child after the abortion, and raise their children under more stable circumstances. By contrast, people denied a wanted abortion experienced more serious health problems, were likely to be left to raise the child alone, were more likely to stay in contact with a violent partner, and experienced economic hardship and insecurity, which lasted for years. And I can provide that study for you if you'd like. Advocates across the state have been working hard for close to 2 years to pass the Roe Act. With the COVID-19 pandemic, The need for the law is all the more urgent so that pregnant people don't have to travel out of state to get abortion health care. We're losing federal level protections for abortion health care, so we must create state level protections. The Roe Act is a matter of basic health care and well-being for people in Massachusetts. Please support the Roe Act. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Patrick Melnik.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. My name is Pat Melnik and I live in Leeds. And I don't know most of you, but I lived in Northampton my entire life. And I don't have one of these big public issues on the agenda tonight. I've got a purely personal one. And as you can see from my email I sent you 2 days ago, that I'm pretty angry about the attempt to confiscate my money without ever being notified by anybody that this was under process. I've been here president my whole life, and it's frankly infuriating that the city would try to take money from me without notifying me they're intending to do so. I should have suspected it because the planning board, again without notice, already decided to withhold my escrow funds. But that's beside the point. The reason I'm here tonight is to let you know that this is a zoning issue. This is not a city council issue. That I have a dispute with the DPW about whether or not 2 stormwater systems for roof drains have been put in or not. And my engineers say they were put in. The city engineers, for whatever reason, don't believe my own engineers. But that's an engineering decision. That's not a city council decision. You can't decide whether or not, you're not engineers, whether or not my engineer is right or their engineer is right. And to have them behind my back come to the city council and try to stab me and try to grab my money and hire engineers to resolve this issue is completely inappropriate. This should be before the Zoning Board of Appeals and ultimately before the courts. And it was my intention to go there. I told planning last month that I wanted a denial letter so that I could take the next step to go to the zoning board or to the courts. And I'm still waiting for that denial letter. And I get a letter from the DPW 2 days ago telling me that you've already acted on this at one point. It's completely, infuriating. Now, I got to tell you, if the DPW had the right to confiscate my money, they would have already done it. If the planning board had the right to do it, they would have already done it. They don't have the right to do it, and nor do you. They're asking you to do it because they're trying to get cover. They don't have any right to just grab money. You don't have any right to grab money either. And having you vote to do that is just trying to get them to have some cover. So I'd ask you to not to act to give planning board and DPW cover for something they don't have the right to do. The money's going to sit there till this is resolved, and it's going to be resolved by the zoning board or the courts, and that's where it should be resolved. You folks shouldn't be part of it. The DPW and planning should not have made you part of it. Basically, that's where I stand. Oh, one other thing. If it goes against me, for example, if the zoning board or the courts say I'm wrong, I have to do this, I'll do it. But I'm pretty sure the court's going to say that I'm right, my engineers are right, and we did everything appropriately. But that's a decision to be made by a judicial body, not by a city council. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to go to Yoko, who was having trouble using the raise hand feature. Yoko, can you unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm here to support the Children's Advocacy Center. My name is Yoko Kato. I've been involved with the CAC for the last 20 years, and I've been a member of the board for the last 9 years. 27 years ago, I lost my 23-year-old daughter, Sherry, and her 18-month-old baby, Cedric, to violent crime in Northampton. Ever since then, I became a voice for victims of domestic violence and victims of child abuse who no longer has voices. Children is our future. We must protect them. CAC's work is preventing child abuse and providing safety and healings and justice. My commitment to support the CAC is the hoping someday there will be fewer or no more child abuse in our community. it is essential to have CAC locally. And I will continue to be a voice for victims until I meet Sherry and Cedric again. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kate Glenn. Kate?
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Kate Glenn. I live in Northampton. And I would like to add my voice to the chorus of those who stand in support of the passage of the resolution to support the Roe Act by this City Council. I want to echo every word that Carrie Baker, Lindsay Sabadosa, and Jennifer McKenna have said. Up until this last February, I owned a child's garden, which was formerly right across the street from City Hall, and spent 13 years supporting new families as we hosted registries, helped them decode the mysteries of cloth diapers, taught them how to hold their babies in slings, and generally listened to what it is like to be a new parent and to figure out how you want to be in the world with your child. For the last 6 years, I've worked with the Abortion Rights Fund of Western Mass. I've been an member of the intake team and now currently sit on the board, and I'm the co-coordinator of our volunteer force. And I can say unequivocally that while it sounds like those two activities may be different, they are linked in a fundamental way. I've been thinking a lot about how we move forward as a community, as a nation, as a country, through whatever happens with the election, whichever way the chips fall. I've been thinking about how do we come together. And I think that one of the basic things that we can all agree on is that you have rights over your body. I have rights over mine. Bodily autonomy is a basic human right. And passing the Roe Act codifies this into Massachusetts law. I can say from firsthand experience, listening to those who are calling to the Abortion Rights Fund to ask for help, that this decision is not one that is taken lightly, and it is vital that we as a Northampton community stand with those who insist and demand that the rights over your body and your life remain with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have the phone number ending in 4006. So try hitting *9 to unmute. And hopefully that'll work. Oh, hi.
Hi, my name is the Reverend Peter Ives. I was the minister of the Northampton church in the center of town for many, many years. I've been a minister in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and in New Haven, Connecticut. And I feel very strongly that clergy should take a strong stand for the passage of the state's Roe Act. I think it's very important for religious leaders to support all of you who are asking the City Council to support the passage of the Roe Act. And I've worked closely with Carrie Baker, and everything Carrie has said to you is what I would want to say to you too, because Carrie is one of the great Northampton spokespersons for the Roe Act. And as a minister, I see the need for so many mothers to have an abortion for so many legitimate reasons. So deeply legitimate for why they have to do this. And it's not easy. It's not easy as a pastor, but it's clear to me that women try very hard to make this decisions, and it's important that they have the freedom to make it. And there came a time when my wife and I ourselves had to make this decision. And so we too know what it feels like, and yet how important this is for people who need to have an abortion. And I hope you will support the State Roe Act at this time.
Thank you, Reverend Ives. Okay. Next, we have Pete.
Hey everybody, my name is Pete Karanzas. I'm from East Hampton, Connecticut, and this is about the Main Street redesign project. I'd like to officially ask the City Council if we could add this as an agenda item to an upcoming meeting. I've been doing a bunch of research on issues with Vision Zero projects, and the main goal would be to address these things ahead of time so they don't cause issues later. I am actually meeting with Wayne Fiden tomorrow morning. We're gonna have a chat. I forwarded him a bunch of things already. Once again, I just want to make sure we're not leaving ourselves open for any of the pitfalls that are commonly occur with these types of meetings. So if you could consider it, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have iPhone. Oops, sorry. Can you unmute?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Rasheen Quinn, and I'm a resident of Northampton, and I live downtown. I'm just questioning. I know we're in, unusual times, and I'm a huge proponent of freedom of speech. But having Main Street shut down yesterday at 4:00, was problematic for many reasons. For parents trying to go pick up children, for people trying to leave and go to and from work, for people trying to get home, for employees trying to get to restaurants and businesses on Main Street, and even for people who want to come to Main Street, but it's shut down. And I'm just wondering who gets to decide when Main Street is shut down. Our businesses they're in trouble. And for Wednesday at 4:00 to be told by the police department that there's 3 protests planned and they have to shut down Main Street, and keep in mind that we've chosen to defund them as well, partially. It's the 5th protest, I think, since Sunday, and I don't know if it's just because we are in unusual times, but it's affecting not just businesses. It's people who live here. It's people who work here. There's many people coming from out of town to protest. I've cleaned up personally at Pulaski Park after protest, but I'm just wondering who gets to look at the residents and the people as a whole and how everybody else is affected. And I just feel like Route 9 actually is, in my mind, a major thoroughfare. I think it's state route. I don't know that we can just decide to shut it down whenever we want. And I think it's gone past the point of common sense. And our restaurants and businesses downtown are feeling it. Residents are feeling it. And I don't know. I just think there needs to be a different way. I'm not saying we shouldn't have protests. I just think we can't shut Main Street down at 4:00 on a Wednesday and think everyone's going to be okay and not affected by that. I think it's becoming really, really, in some ways, unsafe as well. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Cara Crochier. Cara?
Yes, my name is Cara Crochier. I live in Montgomery, commenting on item 20.135 as a proud CAC board member. The CAC House is incredibly important to our organization and to our mission. The House is such an important and unique resource in our community. It's really more than a house. It's a safe haven for children to have a direct treatment line and necessary resources at one location. I think we can all agree it's important to feel safe, understood, and protected, and this House represents that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Kristen Sykes.
Okay, great. Good evening. Thank you so much. My name is Kristen Sykes. I live in Bay State Village in Florence, and I'm here to join the many other compatriots I have here speaking in favor of the resolution urging action on the Roe Act. And I thank Councilors Maori, Chiara, and Dwight for their leadership on this issue. Believe it or not, even though it's 2020, 11 states passed laws in 2019 which restrict access to abortion. And I'm horrified by these attacks on reproductive rights and healthcare for all individuals. As many folks have said, every person should have access to a full range of medical options when it comes to decisions about their pregnancy. And I love what Kate said earlier about body autonomy. As a young woman in my 20s, if I didn't have access to reproductive rights, my life would have been changed forever. In Massachusetts, the basic right to abortion has been protected by our state Supreme Court since 1981. But this is threatened potentially by the Supreme Court with the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett. And if Congress opposes abortion rights, it could impact the Commonwealth. We need to pass the Roe Act ASAP. I really appreciate all the support of the counselors and hope that we can see this happen swiftly and that folks with a uterus are able to make decisions that they want to about their own bodies. Thank you so much for offering this resolution.
Thank you. Next, we have Mo McGuinness.
Hi, everybody. My name's Mo McGuinness. I'm owner of Sylvester's in downtown Northampton and Roberto's. And for many years, we've worked in Northampton. My husband and I were foster parents for years in Northampton, and that brought us to the CAC house. And we are big advocates, and I'm also a board member on the CAC, and we're looking to be supported in the resolution of purchasing the house on 593 Elm Street. And we're hoping we can make that happen. The CAC, unfortunately, is very busy right now with cases, and that's a very sad thing. But what's real important to remember is it is an area in which our whole community, a multi-disciplinary team, the police, the social workers, the teachers, the parents can all gather and help solve real problems like childcare together. And so we're hoping that you will support us in that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, that is everyone who has their hand raised right now. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at public comment? If so, oh, wait, Councilor Nash. Councilor Nash.
Unmuted. Let's see. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted. Do you?
Yes,
Yeah.
I have somebody. I have Hildegard is here to speak for public comment.
Okay.
Hildegard?
Yes.
You have the floor.
Thank you. I spoke to Annie Lusto just a few hours ago in regard to the relevance of this at a city council meeting, and she did not seem to object to my bringing this up. I am not allowed at a policing policy meeting to have public comment. I spoke to last time, and shall continue if we have the time tonight, with the new methodology for police that's a game changer and allows them to walk in the door, which I went into at length at the last meeting. But let me begin saying I am living in Northampton at 35 Fruit Street. Cahill Apartments is a government housing. And my experience with what I call crime is flagrant. I mean, I had crime in my childhood. My father had a Whitey Bulger gang coming in an emergency physician's office. I had crime in a second marriage with a junkie dentist husband. But I have more crime than I ever imagined in public housing. The people that spoke at the policing procedure meeting were excellent, except for their opinions that, well, when I moved to Northampton from Springfield, I was delighted there's no crime. You need someone on this staff, but it's too late now, from public housing, not me, You need someone from public housing. When I moved here, I moved into apartment G68 Cahill, where a woman had committed suicide who was due to go to prison for an assault. Her name was Hernandez. She lived with a son, somewhat legally here with Johnny Hernandez. I have witnessed in Building B endless numbers of whether you want to call them homicide, suicide, or overdose, you might think that the police are at times confused because I don't agree with their language of how they diagnose each one. Someone just died last week by the name of Dustin Dextrace, the son of Dennis Dextrace, in B33 Cahill Apartments. There have been endless, over the last 20 years, in my mind, endless numbers of overdose or homicide or suicide. I don't think we know. I think that we are confused when we diagnose, and including the police are confused. So that is what I wanted to say, that there is crime, and opiates, when they are distributed, if the person is able to walk in the door, that game changer that I recommended last week that was used by outgoing Mayor Bianchi in Pittsfield, but can be used not just as a grant. If we are able to walk in the door, we can witness someone dealing with drugs and many, many other things. So I think I'm going to leave it at that and not confuse you, because I need 4 or 5 sessions to go further into the new methodology that I recommend that was used in an anti-gang grant. And Jim has the
We're at time. So
paper review. I was wrong. It was 2016, not 2017 when I addressed White with this, and when I took my colleague who I did an FBI study.
So your time is up, Hildegard.
Okay, I'm all set.
All right,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to comment to us this evening? I don't see any other hands. So, let me just do a quick scroll through. Okay. Seeing no one else, then we will start the meeting. Laura, will you please take the roll?
Sure. Councillor Dwight.
Here.
Councillor Foster.
Here.
Councillor Jarrett.
Here.
Councillor Labarge.
Here.
Councillor Maori.
Here.
Councillor Nash.
Here.
Councillor Quinlan.
Here.
Councillor Shara.
Here.
And Councillor Thorpe.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, first up on our agenda this evening is the announcement of 2 public hearings. The first one is an announcement of a public hearing regarding the FY 2021 tax levy. The Northampton City Council will hold a public hearing on Thursday, November 19th, 2020 at 7:05 p.m. via remote participation to discuss the percentages of the local tax levy to be borne by each class of real and personal property within the City of Northampton for FY fiscal year 2021 in accordance with Chapter 40, Section 56 of the Massachusetts General Laws. Information regarding this hearing will be available for public inspection online at www.northamptonma.gov on or before November 17th, 2020 after 12 p.m. Instructions for accessing the hearing will be posted on the November 19th, 2020 City Council agenda at northamptonma.gov no later than 48 hours prior to the meeting. The City Council will hear all persons who wish to be heard thereon. The next announcement is for public hearing for item 20.126 Comcast petition to install underground conduit under King Street, dated September 14th, 2020, per Mass General Law, Chapter 166, Section 22. A public hearing will be held on Thursday, November 19th, 2020 at 7:05 p.m. We might want to change, do we want to amend that, Laura, to 7:10?
Oh,
There-
yes, it's at the same, well, yes, that would be good, or 7:15.
Right.
I didn't notice. It's
So we held on the petition of Comcast in Massachusetts to erect poles and wires upon, along, under, or across one or more public ways. Unnumbered petition dated 9/14/2020, King Street. The hearing will be held via remote participation. Please see the agenda for the November 19th, 2020 City Council meeting for instructions for accessing that hearing. So those will both be at our next meeting on November 19th. Next up, do we have any updates? Well, next up, I'll do an announcement first regarding executive session minutes. The open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 22, requires public bodies to regularly review minutes of executive session to determine if they are eligible for release. With the assistance of the administrative assistant, Laura Kutzler, I've reviewed the minutes and determined that due to pending litigation, non-disclosure of the executive session minutes of November 16, 2017 and September 19, 2019 is still warranted, so they have not been released yet. And now, are there other announcements by committee chairs? Hold on, I can't see everybody.
Oh,
Councilor Labarge?
I'm sorry. Thank you. I just wanted to announce, which I did talk with Councilor Nash 2 weeks ago at our city council, at the Police Commission meeting, that as a city councilor and being on the Commission on Disabilities, I did bring it to the commission's attention. It was scheduled for the month of October, but because of the holiday weekend, our ADA coordinator didn't realize that he had to get that posted in within a certain time. So the Commission on Disabilities, everybody does now have the whole layout on the plastic reduction and so forth. And we do have a meeting scheduled for November on the second Tuesday at 4:00 p.m. So I just wanted to give you some updates on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other chairs with announcements. Okay, moving on to 1-minute announcements. I'd just like to start and recognize City Clerk Pam Powers, her staff, election workers, and volunteers, as we, I'm sure, all have been glued to watching votes being counted all across this country right now. It's just, I just really want to recognize how smoothly everything has gone here in Northampton and really thank them for that. It's a real testament to the hard work and the planning and the organization that they put in. This, of course, is an election season like none other for so many reasons, but there have been so many changes and things that they've had to adapt to and figure out, and just kudos to them and just unending gratitude. Any other announcements? Okay, I see Councilor Jarrett, Councilor Nash, and then Councilor Maori.
Thank you. First, I wanted to announce that the planning board is holding 3 public forums, so I'm encouraging people to attend and share their feedback. They're about, one is the Picture Main Street Forum, which is about the redesign of Main Street in downtown, and that's this downtown Northampton. That's Tuesday, November 10th at 7. And then a form-based code for downtown Northampton, which is part of the planning board meeting, Thursday, November 12th at 8 p.m. And then also a form-based code check-in for the Florence Village District, Tuesday, November 17th at 6:30 p.m. Form-based code focuses on guiding the physical form of the buildings in the streetscape rather than the separation of uses. I hope to hear from folks, and especially Ward 5 folks, for the Florence Village District one. Second, I'm on the Northampton Policing Review Commission, and our Alternatives to Policing Subcommittee has met, and our next meeting is this Monday, the 9th at 6:30 p.m., and it will focus on mental health related services. We've invited a member of the police department to attend to explain the current process, and we welcome public comment at the beginning of that meeting. And then finally, thinking about how more personal note with the tumultuous and uncertain time that we're in, perspective that I found useful is to remember that hope and optimism is a decision to make rather than a reaction to what's going on. And that decision helps to guide me and inspire me even in the difficult circumstances. So thank you.
Thank you for that very uplifting personal note. Councillor Nash.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Councillor Jarrett, for the optimism idea. I appreciate that. Yeah, my announcement is the Youth Commission has been holding a number of informational Zoom meetings about the plastic reduction ordinance. It's designed to meet with business leaders. They flyered downtown. The last one is tomorrow. The last scheduled one is tomorrow from 1 to 2 p.m. And information on how to link into that meeting is on the city website. If you go to, it's posted as a meeting tomorrow. So you can hit that link and get a link to the Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maori.
Yeah, so I also want to thank Councillor Jarrett. I didn't realize how starved I was for optimism until you said that. So thanks. And I wanted to echo what President Chiara was saying about our city clerk, Pam Powers, and the election this year was just amazing. I mean, how complex could that be? And it was pretty impressive. And I just wanted to add, I don't know if anyone saw this, spreadsheet in the Gazette with the voting percentages in Western Mass, but I really want to thank all the voters out there and this robust show of civic engagement. Northampton has 82% as its 82% of voters voted. I hope we can keep this up. It's impressive, and I'm really proud to be part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Quinlan, then Councillor Foster.
I just am so thankful to hear all of you. What a week. So it's great to be together and see your faces and hear your voices. But in addition, I wanted to mention that this week, Tuesday, I spent a few hours volunteering with Grow Food Northampton in their community food distribution project. And there is still open slots to volunteer for residents. You can go on their website to fill out their volunteer form, and they'll be in touch about opportunities. And also that's kind of in partnership with the Survival Center on Prospect Street. And again, there's also volunteer opportunities at the Survival Center. So I'd encourage you, if you have time and the will to do it, to join in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
On a similar note to Councillor Quinlan and Councillor Jarrett, again, thank you for the optimism. In one way, I know many of us are, some way people have been dealing with uncertain times is through baking and cooking. And so I wanted to make sure people know that there is an outlet for that can make a real difference in our community. Cathedral in the Night on every Sunday evening at First Churches serves a free meal to our community. The need since COVID has increased significantly. They're serving 70 to 90 meals every Sunday for the community. Many residents who are houseless or food insecure are taking advantage of those meals. Since March, I've been working with the Northampton Kiwanis Club to make sure that there are meals available for those who are vegetarian, as well as baked goods for everybody. And so I encourage anybody to get in touch with me, send me an email, and I can help you sign up to help keep this going. I've committed to doing it through the length until the churches in town are back in service.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to resolutions, and we have 20.146, a resolution urging action on the Roe Act. This is a first reading, and I will read it. This is in the City Council on November 5th, 2020, upon the recommendation of Councillor Gina Louise Shara, Councillor William H. Dwight, and Councillor Rachel Maori. R 20.146, a resolution urging action on the Roe Act. Whereas the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on September 18, 2020, and the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett on October 27, 2020, 1 week before the presidential election, has put Roe v. Wade decided in 1973, and the subsequent Supreme Court cases that have affirmed the right to make personal medical decisions about when or if to have a child in the most dire jeopardy of their history. Whereas the Trump-Pence administration has enabled states to implement unconstitutional bans and restrictions to legal and safe abortions, with the end goal of creating legal challenges that could overturn Roe v. Wade if they ascend to the Supreme Court. Whereas the overturn of Roe v. Wade would leave many states and whole regions of the United States with very restricted or no access to legal and safe abortions. And 10 states have already passed, quote, trigger laws, unquote, that would ban abortion as soon as Roe is overturned. Whereas it is essential that states protect and bolster abortion access and stand as bulwarks protecting the right to legal reproductive health care for their own residents and for those that will need to travel out of state to obtain safe health care. Whereas states such as New York, Vermont, Illinois, and the District of Columbia have acted to protect rights to reproductive health care if Roe v. Wade is overturned. Whereas 74% of Massachusetts residents support legal access to abortion, which is the highest support of any state. And whereas despite this overwhelming support, there's currently no state law that asserts that abortion is legal in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, protecting that right outside of the federal right afforded by Roe v. Wade. Whereas current Massachusetts abortion law includes medically unnecessary and harmful restrictions, incorrect and inappropriate definitions and terminology, and other restrictions that are on the books, such as a 24-hour waiting period, but have been superseded by Roe v. Wade since 1973. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, these will be the standing laws for Massachusetts. Whereas the COVID-19 crisis has heightened and highlighted the harm and inequities of the 24-week ban and judicial bypass restrictions in Massachusetts. These restrictions force pregnant people to have avoidable exposure or to travel out of state to access care, which is burdensome always, but potentially endangering or prohibited during a pandemic. Whereas the current restrictions disproportionately affect those who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, or those that are low income and who already suffer from unequal access and systemic barriers to healthcare. Whereas the Roe Act, an act to remove obstacles and expand abortion access, S 1209 and H 3320, which is co-sponsored by Northampton State Senator Joanne N. Comerford and State Representative Lindsay N. Sabadosa, will codify and protect the right to abortion in the Commonwealth, correct prejudicial and incorrect language in the general law, remove gestational age from the language so termination may still occur for fetal abnormalities, remove judicial bypass, and provide coverage for those who do not qualify for mass health. Whereas on June 20th, 2019, the Northampton City Council passed, quote, a resolution affirming support for access to safe and legal abortion in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and across the United States, unquote, supporting and urging the passage of the Roe Act by the state legislature. And whereas the Roe Act has remained unaddressed in the state legislature's Joint Committee on the Judiciary since 2019. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of Northampton hereby reasserts its initial endorsement and asks the state legislature to move with all deliberate speed and urgency to pass the Roe Act. Without immediate action, they jeopardize the rights and health of their constituents and leave the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts at risk of the loss of their current right to safe and legal abortion. Be it further resolved that the administrative assistant to the City Council shall cause a copy of this resolution to be sent to Massachusetts Governor Charles Baker, Senate President Karen Spilka, House Speaker Robert DeLeo, lead sponsor of S 1209, State Senator Harriet L. Chandler, lead sponsors of H 3320, State Representatives Prisha A. Haddad and J. D. Livingstone, chairs of the Joint Committee on the Judiciary, State Senator James B. Eldridge and State Representative Claire D. Cronin, State Senator Joanne N. Comerford, and State Representative Lindsay N. Sabadosa. Okay. Is there?
Move approval, please.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Councillor Dwight and seconded by Councillor Labarge. I'll lead off on comments if you don't mind. I want to thank my sponsors for joining me on my co-sponsors on this resolution. And I want to thank Jennifer McKenna, the Abortion Rights Fund of Western Mass, others, many of who spoke this evening, for their guidance and their tireless and truly inspiring work for abortion rights here in Western Mass, but also beyond. A lot has happened since the council passed the resolution, reiterating our support of abortion rights in general and supporting the Roe Act in particular in June 2019. A lot has happened and is happening. This is an extreme time, and there is so much heightened rhetoric, and I'm not really sure how to project through the din of it. And I recognize I'm adding to it, but I just can't state strongly enough that this is an emergency. It's an emergency that I think many, if not most, of the 3/4 of the Commonwealth, and likely more, who fully support abortion rights and laws are aware of, that it's such an emergency. At this moment, we're as concerned as we were back in June 2019 about eliminating the unnecessary and discriminatory restrictions, correcting archaic and incorrect and honestly offensive language that is in our state abortion laws. But in the context of now, this moment, this is an absolute screaming emergency, because right now in Massachusetts, we don't have an affirmative law legalizing and protecting abortion if Roe v. Wade falls. The overturning of Roe is very much as you all know, is very much the prize that Republicans have been fighting for. And with the appointment of Barrett, the pieces are in place for the court to do that. Many, like myself, who have lived our lives in a time where the fundamental rights to control decisions about our body have been protected by Roe, albeit with state restrictions, that's all we've known. And we're likely going to experience what it's going to be like without that federal protection. While we've always known that we need to fight for Roe v. Wade, I think there's less recognition that we really need to fight for state protections. Even in a state like Massachusetts, where we have, I think, a false sense of security. There is no security. People need to know that there isn't a law that secures the right to safe and legal abortion in Massachusetts. And in fact, the laws that are on the books include things that are currently unenforced, like a mandatory waiting period. And these were created by anti-abortion legislators in 1974 in response to Roe v. Wade. This has to be corrected. It cannot wait. As I believe Representative Sabadosa said, this week, the Senate President and the Speaker have both put out a statement committing to taking up Roe before the end of the year. That's great. And with all respect to her representative, that's great, but leaving that up to a promise from the state legislature that they'll act quickly makes me a little bit queasy, because they're not really known for acting quickly. So I think it's really important that we state this as firmly as we possibly can, and we use our political voice. And I ask my fellow counselors to do this with me. And I also ask that you and all the residents of Northampton do everything you can in addition to this to make it known that this must happen in the next 6 or so weeks before the session ends. There is no other option. We need to have this protection. So thank you so much for joining me in this. Councilor Labarge.
Thank you. I am in full support of the Roe Act, and there's no question about it. I think what bothers me, and I think our Council President Gina Sciarra put it right where it's at. Here we did a resolution in June 20th of 2019. The Northampton City Council passed the resolution affirming support for access to safe and legal abortion. It'll be almost a year and it's been sitting on the table. And that tells me something. And you said exactly what is right, Councilor Sciarra. We need to act on this immediately. Even though we're hearing, yes, it's sitting there, but they're going to do something about it. I don't trust it at all. So I am supporting this, and I just feel that this needs to be passed immediately. And I think State Rep Lindsay Sabadosa did an excellent job thoroughly today explaining about the Roe Act, explaining about how women have to travel out of state to have an abortion, and especially during the COVID-19. I think as a woman, all of us that are women have a rights to say what we want to do with our bodies. And if we want an abortion, we should have a right to say we want an abortion and be able to be in our own state and be safe and feel that we have the rights to do what we want to do with our body, and having a very safe area and having health care available for us. So I am supporting this.
you. Councilor Maori.
Yeah, I want to, I do feel very appreciative of our state rep and our state senator on this. And I want to thank my co-sponsors as well, President Chiara and Councilor Dwight, with a special appreciation for you, President Chiara, because of your longtime advocacy on this issue. And you made this resolution happen, and I'm so glad for it. Neral, just for some perspective, so many things have been said, but I think that we need to be reminded that the majority of residents in Massachusetts support safe, legal access to abortion. NARAL confirms that 8 in 10 voters, including those who identify as Catholic, want Roe v. Wade to be upheld, and further believe that if a woman has decided to have an abortion, it should be safe, legal, affordable, and available in her community without shame or pressure. These 80% of voters agree that we need to pass laws, quote, to respect, support, and empower women, ensuring that everyone has access to respectful, quality, and affordable reproductive health care, including abortion. And yet this is not currently being represented in Massachusetts. So I just, let us not pretend on a state or federal level that these attacks to access to safe and legal abortion are part of a larger cynical agenda that includes undermining, the Violence Against Women Act, rolling back harassment protections and the rights of trans people, forced hysterectomies and ICE detention center. And to me, these are kind of all related, and they're all meant to tamp down the very status and locus of control and human rights of women. We are, we're not shielded from this direct assault on access to reproductive health care just by virtue of living in Massachusetts. And it makes it clear that all the provisions in the Roe Act are essential. And at least the governance of Massachusetts should be doing, it's the least that the governance of Massachusetts should be doing for over half of its residents. We need the strongest possible legislation and advocacy at the federal, state, and local level. Like so many attacks on civil liberties across the board, including voting rights, this is an all hands on deck moment. This is not a place for compromise, and there's no time to spare. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilor Dwight.
Thank you. To my 2 lead sponsors, I will identify them as, and also to the women who testified, and to Reverend Ives as well. Just in this bizarre election, the state of Colorado and the state of Louisiana just passed even more draconian restrictions on a woman's right to make a choice about her own body. Honestly, there's no, the context, if you put this in context, I mean, there is, as we've often pointed out, there's no equivalent restrictions on a way a male conducts themselves, how they are. There is no law governing our choices in health. There's nothing close, and including our reproductive systems. I think, unfortunately, part of what accounts for Massachusetts' current law, with its really kind of grotesque language and its standard, and the fact that there is a certain complacency, there was an understanding that we are a progressive state and we're progressive in all ways. So for, I suppose, many people wasn't on their radar. And I think for legislators, they were given a certain comfort zone while Ruth Bader Ginsburg still walked this planet. That all changed really quickly. The legislature can no longer find comfort in the fact that we have this kind of antique, creaky law, but it's still, for them, it's enough right now. It's no longer enough. It wasn't enough to begin with. And the urgency here is actually, as Councilor Shara and Councilor Maori both emphasize, is paramount. We need to establish in this dark time where there has been a systematic dismantling of progressive human rights programming and issues and laws in this country, it falls upon the states, it falls upon the local communities to actually make the difference. And here is our opportunity, as feeble as it is in some respect, because we're not making a law. We cannot direct anyone to do anything, but we can make an appeal, and we can make it an unequivocal appeal, an unapologetic appeal for something that pushes us a little closer towards justice and equity, and something that is grotesquely inequitable. So I'm glad that we actually get to make our case again. And I do hope that it registers. I hope there is a response in the legislature, not just from us, but from, as Councilman Maori pointed out, over 3/4 of their constituents have come to expect and believe is the case, and maybe be deluded into thinking that it's a robust and solid protection for women. And that the legislators will act as quickly as possible, make it a #1 priority to move this through, because as we see insofar in this moment of great unknowing, we don't know who will be presiding over the federal government starting January 20th, and there's 11 weeks before that time even occurs. There's lots of opportunities for even more cruelty and more malevolent acts, and it is imperative that Massachusetts create a bulwark, a protective layer for at the very least for the most vulnerable here in our state, in our Commonwealth. So thank you very much to the co-sponsors. Thank you very much for everyone's testimony. I'm genuinely moved.
Any other comments? Councillor Nash.
I want to thank you, Council President, Councilor Maori, and Councilor Dwight for bringing us this resolution. I also want to thank Representative Savadosa and Senator Comerford for their efforts around this. And I want to thank everybody who spoke tonight. I supported our resolution back in 2019 and fully support what we are doing here tonight. I really appreciate that during times like this, that it's best for us to do the work that we need to do. That there are things that are out of our control, and this is something where we can take control and express our values and have it make changes within our Commonwealth and express how we feel here in Northampton. During this difficult time, this is exactly what we should be doing, and I completely support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
I would like to echo the thanks to the 3 co-sponsors of this resolution, as well as to those who spoke in favor of it tonight. I remember when the resolution in favor of the Roe Act, when City Council passed it, I remember being on the hypothetical other side of the microphone to speak in front of it. And, we all know that this pandemic has highlighted, shown a spotlight on, and exacerbated existing and deepening inequities. And it's an imperative that all residents of Massachusetts, regardless of gender, have access to reproductive health care. And that means, as we've talked about and heard about, that it's safe, it's affordable, and it's accessible. And we know that there's barriers to that. And this is something that our state legislature can act on, and I urge them to. I would like to add my voice in support, that I fully support taking action on the Roe Act. It needs to happen sooner than later. And I'll be proud to vote yes with my colleagues tonight.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Quinlan and Councillor Jarrett.
Well, again, thanks so much to the sponsors and to everyone that spoke in public comment. It's just so, to kind of get back to the positivity, to feel the community talking about something and feeling very similarly about it is so great and encouraging. Looking at this resolution, I'm just so impressed with the statement of tremendous fact here. Basically 3/4 of adults here in Massachusetts believe in a woman's right to choose. This was decided 47 years ago. It's been reaffirmed twice since in 92 and 16. Yet here we are fighting to ensure something that was decided a long time ago can stand, and the fight is being brought here in the state because we cannot count on our federal offices to do what's right by the people of America here. The one positive thing I have to say is earlier this year, this council together passed a resolution urging our state legislature to pass a bill for vote by mail, which was done with great urgency. Why? To ensure safe, healthy voting options. The same urgency is needed now to create safe, healthy options for women's rights, women's reproductive rights. And yet, again, here we are fighting to ensure something that was decided 47 years ago. It's time for our state legislature to act. And so I will join with my colleagues in urging them to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarrett.
Thank you. Thank you especially for explaining the urgency of the situation. I also echo the thanks that people, that others have said. Especially at this time, states need to take the lead, and we absolutely need to codify under state law the rights that have long been fought for. So I will be voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. So to go with what everyone else was saying, I echo what everyone else said earlier, and I'm happy to support this. And I want to thank you, Council President Sierra, Councillor Dwight, and Councillor Maori for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any further comments this evening? All right, seeing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Councillor Dwight,
Yes.
Councillor Foster,
Yes.
Councillor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councillor Labarge,
Yes.
Councillor Maori,
Yes.
Councillor Nash,
Councillor Nash?
Yes.
Councillor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councillor Shara,
Yes.
and Councillor Thorpe.
Yes.
That passes in first reading. I'd like to ask the council to indulge us in doing a second reading, because as we've spent a lot of time talking about, the urgency really couldn't be stronger.
Move to suspend rules to allow for a second reading.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded for second reading. Any discussion on motion? Okay, motion's been made and seconded to suspend rules. Any discussion on suspension of rules? Seeing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Councillor Foster,
Yes.
Councillor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councillor Labarge,
Yes.
Councillor Maori,
Yes.
Councillor Nash,
Yes.
Councillor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councillor Shara,
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Councillor Dwight.
Yes, and move second reading, please.
Second it.
Motion's been made by Councillor Dwight, seconded by Councillor Labarge on second reading. Any discussion on second reading? Seeing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
and Counselor Foster.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in second reading. Thank you, everybody. Next we move on to the consent agenda. And I'm just gonna close the door because my kids are incoming, so give me a sec. Okay, thank you. Consent agenda. I'm going to read the items and then I'm going to ask if there are any removals for discussion. I think there might be one. So first up, we have the minutes of July 30th, 2020 special city council meeting and September 17th, 2020 and October 1st, 2020. Next, we have, these are appointments to the Arts Council. They've received positive recommendations from city services. Kent Alexander, 174 Island Road. Term is October 2020 to June 2023. This is to fill a vacancy. Northampton Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. Jeff Jones, UFCW Local 1459, Organized Labor Representative, 76 Woods Road. The term is March 2020 to February 2025. This is a reappointment. Then these are appointments for referral to city services. To the Housing Partnership, Ace Talo, 14 Fruit Street, Apartment 1. Term is November 2020 to June 2023. That's to fill a vacancy. Hannah Schaffer, 115 Milton Street in Florence. Term is November 2020 to June 2023. That's to fill a vacancy. Northampton Housing Authority Board of Commissioners, Edgardo Cancel. This is the Northampton Housing Partnership appointee. Term November 2020 to June 2023. This is to fill a newly created position on the Northampton Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. Next is 20.147, secondhand dealer license application for feeding tube records. This is a renewal application. Feeding tube records, 221 Pine Street in Florence. Applicant is Edward Lee. And those are the items on the consent agenda. Any removals? Councilor Dwight.
Yes, I'd like to remove item 20.147.
Okay. So we will remove that. And so there's no discussion on the rest of the consent agenda. So is
I
there
move approval of the remaining items.
Okay. Motion's been made by Councilor Dwight, I think seconded by Councilor Thorpe. Roll call, please, on the consent agenda minus that removal.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
and Counselor Jarrett.
Yes.
Okay, that's been approved. So now we're going to take up 20.147 secondhand dealer license application for feeding tube records. Councilor Dwight?
I have to recuse myself from this for a possible conflict with relatives. So I'm gonna disappear for a second.
Okay. So Councilor Dwight is recused. Is there any discussion? I guess we need a motion and a second for approval.
Make a motion for approval.
Second.
Councilor Labarge made the motion. Councilor Thorpe seconded it. Any discussion on this application? Seeing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
and Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay, that has been approved and Councilor Dwight can return. And we are now going to recess for finance. Laura, when you're ready, can you take the role of finance?
Sure. Counselor Labarge,
Here.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes, here.
Counselor Shara,
Here.
and Counselor Thorpe.
Here.
Okay. First, we have the approval of minutes of September 17th, 2020 and October 1st, 2020.
Approve.
Seconded.
Motion was made by Counselor Labarge, seconded by Counselor Thorpe. Any discussion on those minutes? Hearing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
and Counselor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, those are approved. Our first financial order is 20.135 in order to declare surplus and authorize sale of 593 Elm Street. Counselor Thorpe.
Councilor Skier, I am recusing myself from this since I am a board member with the CAC, so I'm disappearing.
Thank you. Okay, of the remaining committee, is there, oh, here, I'll read it and then we'll get a motion. So this is in the City Council on November 5th, 2020, upon the recommendation of Mayor David J. Narkowitz, in order to declare surplus and authorize sale of 593 Elm Street. Ordered that whereas the City of Northampton owns a property located at 593 Elm Street, as shown on Assessor's Map 23B, Parcel 47, Lot 2, and whereas the city currently leases the property to the Children's Advocacy Center, CIC, of Hampshire County, Inc., a private nonprofit providing medical, mental health, victim advocacy, and other services to children and families. And whereas the Children's Advocacy Center of Hampshire County, Inc. is interested in purchasing the property to make it the permanent home of the CAC in advancement of its critical mission of minimizing secondary trauma to child victims by streamlining the handling of cases of child sexual abuse, serious physical abuse, and child exploitation. And whereas on October 20th, 2020, the Board of Trustees of Smith Vocational and Agricultural High School, after determining that the property was no longer needed for current or future educational purposes, voted to surplus the building to the city. And whereas the City of Northampton does not have a municipal use for the property, and Mass General Law, Chapter 30B, Section 16 requires a vote of the City Council to surplus any interest in public property prior to its disposal. And so now, therefore, be it ordered, the property at 593 Elm Street is declared surplus to city needs and is hereby transferred to the care, custody, and control of the mayor for the purpose of selling such property for continued use for child advocacy services in accordance to Massachusetts procurement laws, and on such terms and conditions as the mayor deems reasonable and appropriate, provided that the property shall not be sold for less than its current fair market value, and if sold to a nonprofit entity, shall be subject to the successful bidder entering into an agreement for payment in lieu of taxes. Okay. Is there a
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded, and Mayor Narkowitz, I see you here. Would you like to talk to us about this?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So this is an order that I actually sponsored on the Board of Trustees of Smith Vocational as well. The folks at the CAC, some of whom you've heard from this evening, reached out to me several months ago and indicated that they were very interested in potentially purchasing the building outright. They've been leasing it for several years from Smith Vocational and have the possibility, because of some grant funding, to be able to purchase it outright. So we brought an order forward to the Board of Trustees, discussed it with the trustees as well as the administration at Smith Vocational. It was unanimously adopted that they would surplus the property back to the city. And so in order for us to then put it out to an RFP, it requires the city council to surplus it again, surplus it for city uses. This is a great organization, as you've heard during the public comment session, that does incredibly difficult but vital work in our community, and they've put a lot of investment into this facility. and the location and the services that they provide there are critical. And so I wanted to help facilitate this, as did the Board of Trustees of Smith Vocational. It's somewhat analogous to other surpluses we've done to nonprofits that have been tenants in city property. I can think of like the Nonotuck School and the old Fiker School, or the Community Music Center, which leased for many years the old South Street School, and eventually reached a point where they had the resources and it just made more sense for them to own it. And frankly, from the city's perspective, it makes more sense for us not to hold on to it as a liability and to just, not, if it's, especially in a school when it's not being used for educational purposes. So, so this will all follow the same process that I followed for these other buildings that we've surplused. There'll be an appraisal done, and then an RFP will be issued that obviously limits the use of the property to any future buyer, in this case for children's advocacy services. And then the pilot agreement is a standard that we've done with all of our surplus properties over the years. So I hope that the council will support this. Again, it's a great organization, and I think this would be a great use for permanent use for this particular city-owned facility.
Thank you. Councilors, discussion. Councilor Quinlan and Councilor Jarrett.
Well, I thank you for the explanation, Your Honor. The and also taking me down memory lane a little, as my kids both went to Nonotuck and both took lessons at the community music school. But in this particular case, I was just curious about one thing. I agree with you. We heard really terrific public testimony this evening about this organization and the use of this building for that, and I agree wholeheartedly. I'm just curious, in terms of the pilot program, how does that work in terms of just in comparing it to what it would be if it was sold to a private entity and there was taxes on it? I'm just curious about that, how that compares.
So the formula we've been using for all of our nonprofits where we sold a city building to is we essentially ask them to pay 25% of what the building would be taxed at if it were not owned by a tax exempt property owner. So basically a quarter of what the tax bill would be. You also have to keep in mind that because this building will be owned by a nonprofit, and because there's actually a deed restriction on the property that says it can only be used, for this purpose, that also has an impact on the value of the property, similar to, affordable housing or other projects. They pay taxes or they're assessed, but obviously the assessment factors in, what the actual market value is. So, yeah, it's 25%. It's something I've discussed already with the CAC folks. They understand that. It's what the folks at Community Music School and Nonotuck also agreed to, and it's something that the city's been doing for several years. Obviously, we've had long conversations about payment in lieu of taxes, and had hoped that some of our larger tax exempt organizations would participate in a pilot program. But so this is the one way we feel that in basically not putting a piece of property back onto the tax rolls at least captures some relief or value to the tax base in terms of this pilot payment.
But yeah, thank you for that explanation, and also the value to the community of having these resources available is important too, and that's a great investment. The 75% being an investment on the city's part. So, thank you.
Wait, who else had their hand up? Councilor Jarrett, then Councilor Labarge, and Councilor Maori.
Okay, thank you. I'm so glad to understand what the Children's Advocacy Center does, and I'm glad to support this. And a note about the pilot agreement is this gets us some amount of income, while if this nonprofit just bought a property, we would not get anything unless we negotiated that. I had a couple of questions. So the city will hold the deed restriction. Is that correct? And we could change it in the future if for some reason, the Children's Advocacy Center didn't want that property anymore?
So what we've essentially what we do is, it's not really a deed restriction necessarily. The RFP, basically what the RFP says is that they will have, it can only be used, it has to be used for children's advocacy services for the next 25 years. So it basically bakes in that anyone who purchases it has to, and that's a number we've used for the other similar sales we've done. So it's not really something we hold. It's more of a restriction on the future, on the use of the property. So if it were to be sold or transferred, it can only be used for those purposes. And the CAC folks understand that. So in terms of what would happen if they didn't want to honor that, that would be something we would then have to, take legal action on. I don't really think that that's going to be the case here. So it's not exactly like a historic deed restriction or like a conservation restriction or a historic restriction that's sort of separate and above the deed. It's something that's sort of baked into the sale, and they understand that they have to maintain it for that use for the first 25 years.
Mm-hmm. My concern was more, what if they outgrew that space? They're kind of locked in, but I guess that's a decision that they get to make.
Yeah, no, I think that they've definitely, certainly they have a lease right now, so they could continue to lease it. And I think they're on like their second or third lease, but I think they've made the decision that actually it would be probably free up more resources to not be a rent payer, but to actually, own the property and have probably a smaller mortgage than what they're paying in rent. So that's the decision they've made. And so we're trying to honor that.
Right. Thank you. My second question is that, does this property have an apartment in it? I know I have constituents at this address, or I did a year ago.
There had over time, there had been an apartment upstairs, I believe. But to my knowledge, it's not something it's something that's intermittently, I think, been used, but I believe that in more recent years, it hasn't been used in that way. I think the lease with Smith Vocational actually stipulated that it couldn't be used that way. But obviously, if we sell the building outright, that'll be a decision for the CAC whether they want to utilize part of it in that way or not. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my concern was, will this be reducing our housing stock in some way if there had been apartments that were rented, and wonder if some of the proceeds from the sale could go toward affordable housing. Well,
yeah. As I said, it was a sort of an intermittent situation. So I don't think that it's part of our permanent stock. And in fact, I'm fairly certain that the folks at Smith said that they didn't want folks living there because of issues around the building. But in terms of the proceeds of the project, the proceeds of the sale must be used for capital expenses. That's sort of a stipulation of sale of city property. And I've pledged that I would use those funds for a Smith Vocational capital project. Just like when we've sold school buildings, we've used the proceeds for an NPS capital project. So it's not something that we can use for other purposes. It really has to be used for capital.
Thank you.
Even if we wanted to put it toward affordable housing, we couldn't. We were restricted in terms of sale of land like this.
Councilor Labarge.
Mayor, how much land is involved with the house?
It's not a, it's just a building lot. It's not a huge, I know it sort of sits near the orchard, and there's like the orchard, and then there's an old farm road that takes you up to the school. But really it's a frontage lot. It's probably a standard size lot for that neighborhood. I'm not sure if it's in the order or not. I can't remember if it's, there is a parcel ID, but I can't remember if we actually put the acreage, but it's probably a standard lot in that area, which, I don't know, quarter to half acre, I'm not sure. So.
My question, Mayor, is I think Councilor Jarrett had some concerns, just say they became bigger and bigger. Could they actually add on to that house, like an addition?
Again, it would be their property, and they would be free to do that if they wanted. I don't think that it's on such a small lot that they'd be limited from doing that. But again, part of this is I believe they view this as their sort of forever home, and they've been there now for several leases, and it's worked out very well. And so that's why they want to sort of be able to control their own destiny, as it were, and own the property. And if that means expanding or putting additions on.
I think CAC is a great organization. We heard them talk tonight about it being safe haven, and I have to agree with that. So that was my question. Also, was at any point, if they became a larger private organization, would they be able to add on? So you answered my question. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Maori was next.
The mayor already answered my question as well. Thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions? Councilor Fuller?
Well, I just wanted to follow up on what Councilor Jarrett was asking about the proceeds, and the mayor mentioned that it would be devoted to a Smith Voc capital project. Have you identified a project yet? Are there multiple ideas already, or has one been selected?
Yeah, no. Typically Smith submits projects as part of the capital program, and we always have projects on our 5-year capital plan from Smith. And I know they've got lots of. There's always needs. Particularly for some of their older buildings. So I'm sure we'll have no trouble finding projects. We're in the middle of replacing lockers now as part of the capital program. And we've done roofs, we've done vans, and we've done other things for the school. So we'll work with them to identify what their greatest need is. And these funds will be put aside for funding those projects.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Nash?
Memory serves me right. This project originally had to do with a construction project with Smith Voc students that they constructed the home. Is that right?
It's been referred to as the farmhouse. It's a farmhouse that
the updating.
Yeah, they definitely students have done work in the home at the time that it was being set up. It wasn't built by students, but it was there have been several properties and homes gifted to the school over the years, and so this was a project, and I believe students were involved at one point in the project.
Right.
I can't tell you more recently. I know it. The director of maintenance at the school, Tim Smith, does do maintenance there and is responsible for maintenance, and But yeah, it's quite possible.
I saw Councilor Dwight's head nodding. There was students were involved, I think, in renovations at some point.
That would not surprise me.
Of Smith students working on this property, that Northampton and Smith have gone to nurture this program into existence, and here we are, furthering the existence of that program. I think it's just like it's really wonderful the way the city and Smith Folk have all worked together to make this program happen. And so anyway, I just wanted to note that.
Thank you.
Councilor Dwight.
Just a quick word, and basically to commend the mayor. In the past, actually, when we surplus properties, there were no associated pilots. In fact, actually, what we kept doing was taking large, significant properties and rendering them over to vital nonprofits. But the fact is that there was the only upside for the city was the reduced liability, no longer having to maintain mothballed buildings and so on. But it started, I think, back with the sale of the old firehouse that was to Media Education Foundation in Woodstar, that they volunteered on the purchase pilot, and it was at that point that the city decided that maybe that's not a bad idea on all future sales to nonprofit systems. So actually, and Nonotuck was a perfect example. You have valuable assets to the community, but at the same time, there is a cost associated with that had to be borne by the city that we did gladly, and the community was quite generous. But the fact is that this economically works so much better. We have essentially an assurance that all these institutions are going to remain serving the community, and at the same time, there's an offset with the lost tax revenue, and we also reduce our liability on properties that there's no benefit to the city, other than these lease agreements have become even more complicated. So, building into the condition of sale, essentially the covenant. I don't know if that's even be the legal assignment, but that for 25 years, assuring that these enterprises will stay and continue their missions, and at the same time, we get to reap the benefits of their good work without the increased cost to us at a time when it becomes harder and harder to meet those costs. So I just, since I possess a tiny little historical perspective, I wanted to offer that.
Thank you, Councilor. Yeah, definitely there were some pilots early on, and I will say that in more recent years, since the ill-fated launch of my pilot program, where I came up with the 25%, we've been using that as the formula. So that sort of morphed into the formula. There were different pilots that were developed for different parcels over time. But we sort of landed on this 25% one, and that's the one that we've been using. And this is now, I believe this is now the fourth city building that my administration has surplused, that had been previously buildings that we had leased, the old Florence Grammar School, and obviously I mentioned the old Fiker School and South Street School, the Water Department building, which is going to Congregation B'nai Israel, and now this one, which will go to another worthy organization. So I think and these are serving very important community purposes.
Councilor Dwight.
And just to follow up with a ding that the mayor's too polite to make, actually, but the fact is all these agencies, as I said, contribute proportionally a great deal to the community. We have some larger institutions with larger assets that were not so willing to comply or at least accommodate us. And simply, we can only ask. We can't tell or command or demand. But in this case, these sales of the property, we can actually make it a condition of sale. But there are larger agencies that absolutely are very important to our community and contribute to our community. But the fact is they don't contribute a proportional amount of funds that these smaller nonprofits that are in most cases wheezing along hoping for the next state grant, as opposed to having large, deep endowments and expanding revenue streams. I'm just saying, I'm not going to mention any by name, but they're it'd be nice if they followed their very honest lead. It's enough, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments, veiled or otherwise? Okay. Seeing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Okay. Councillor Labarge,
Yes.
Councillor Quinlan,
Yes.
and Councillor Shara.
Yes. That moves forward with a positive recommendation. We will welcome Councillor Thorpe back. And next we have 20.136. In order to make changes to the FY 2021 general fund budget to balance the FY 2021 budget. And okay, this is in the City Council, November 5th, 2020, upon the recommendation of the mayor. Ordered that to balance the fiscal year 2021 budget, the following changes to the FY 2021 general fund budget as passed by the City Council on June 18th, 2020 be hereby made. Reduce the amount raised and appropriated from receipts reserved for parking by $350,000. This will reduce the total RRA parking appropriated in the FY 2021 general fund budget from $1,392,873 to $1,042,873. Increase the amount appropriated from the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund by $358,949. This will increase the amount taken from the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund from $52,418 to $411,367. Is there a motion? Motion's been made by Councillor Quinlan, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. And Mayor Narkowitz?
Yes, so as you may recall at various points during this 2020 year and even dating back to the budget process, I've been indicating that we would likely need to come back to the City Council at some point in the future to true up the budget. We were making our best estimates back in May when we submitted this budget, not really knowing what the full extent of COVID-19 would be in terms of impacts on city revenues, as well as the fact that we were doing so without having a state budget passed in place. So we didn't actually have a true cherry sheet with revenues that we could count on or use to make our budget with. We were basically using the governor's budget, which had been submitted pre-pandemic, and then building in some of our own assumptions about what we thought it would do to revenues during the pandemic. So fast forward, and we're now at a point where we need to be able to certify that our budget is balanced, and this is part of where we are as we approach the tax rate process that you announced the hearing for in terms of setting the tax rate for FY 2021. We have to be able to show to the state that we're using actual revenues and we have revenues to support the expenses that are outlined in our budget. As I may have mentioned to you at the last meeting, the governor, sort of a little bit out of the blue, because we've been sort of wondering, is there going to be another state budget? Is there going to be a revised state budget? Did finally submit a revised budget for FY 2021, sort of updating the budget that he had first submitted back in January, which obviously was pre-COVID. And so he that sort of updated our cherry sheets in terms of what our revenues were. And not unsurprisingly, in order to balance the state's budget and to be able to maintain services, and because of the same drops in revenue, they're relying on funding from what they call their rainy day fund, which is essentially sort of a stabilization fund. So the budget that the governor submitted relies on, I think, $1.2 billion from the state's stabilization or rainy day fund. And today, the House of Representatives, the Speaker announced that they would begin their budget process and effectively announced that they would use the governor's framework in terms of not seeking new tax revenue, not seeking to raise new tax revenue in the middle of the pandemic, but rather to rely on the use of reserves like the governor had. So as we've reported to you over the past several months, and I know the finance director went through the quarterly reports, you've sort of seen some of the way the revenues have fluctuated and gone up and gone down in some cases. We've seen some deep drops in revenue, parking, for example. We've seen obviously hotel motel revenues come in lower than even we had predicted. Some revenues have actually rebounded better than we thought, like ambulance revenues. Adult use marijuana actually rebounded because they were only closed for a short period, relatively short period of time. So those have rebounded. And actually our new growth has remained quite strong, largely I think because the construction industry was not really significantly affected. And many of the large projects that have been underway and were underway have progressed. And so our new growth was not really affected as well. So what this order basically does, and this is for the general fund budget, there's some orders coming after for water enterprise and sewer enterprise, is basically make adjustments to our revenue. In one case, we're sort of lowering our estimate or draw from the receipt reserve for parking. And then in the case of the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund, we're taking funding out of that to basically stabilize the general fund budget, to basically, even out all of those pluses and minuses that impacted our overall revenues, in order to make sure that that the budget we are submitting, or that we've already submitted, but we have to have certified by the state, actually is truly imbalanced, and we can justify that. So that's what these orders do. And you'll hear a very similar presentation about the water and sewer revenues as well. So that's the orders that I'm submitting for you today.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Jarrett.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, for the explanation of that. I think it makes a lot of sense to me. It seems very appropriate use of the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund. I'm in favor. Since we are talking about the use of this fund, and we may receive orders in the future for additional use, I do think it's appropriate and germane to the motion to speak briefly about the money that our reduction in the police budget left in this fund, and my hope that some of this money be used to enhance public safety and meet the needs of our community. I know that you, Mayor, employ data-driven decisions. I'm sure that the Northampton Policing Review Commission will deliver on that. But also there are two reports that the Mayor has commissioned, one on panhandling and the other on affordable housing. And moving on the recommendations from these, I think would help some of the problems we're seeing downtown and elsewhere. And I appreciate all of the work that the Mayor has done in this area, moving forward on the Resilience Center, for example. And while I can't speak for the council, I want the Mayor to know that I would support further funding of these recommendations from this fund. So I wanted to share that, but I also want to caution us not to deliberate something now that's not on the agenda. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate that. And it's duly noted. And I know at the time that those cuts were made by the council, I think there was some question about, at the time, should I be reallocating them at the time? And I think one of the things I expressed to you, and I think I expressed it publicly, was my apprehension, knowing that we would likely be in a situation later in the year where we would have to use our fiscal stability funds just to balance the budget. So, so while we ended up freeing up, 600,000 or so, I don't have the number right in front of me, that we didn't have to use from fiscal stability, we're now having to tap into, the amount that we're tapping into tonight. So it's not but your point is well taken. And obviously those two studies are important, and we are working to advance them. I know the Housing Partnership is going through those recommendations from the fair housing analysis, and actually working on a guest column in the Gazette that'll be happening pretty soon, and they're working on them in that regard. And then obviously we continue to work to advance the Resiliency Hub initiative, and have some couple of grants in right now to help support that. So, but your point is well taken, and obviously what I've been telling people is one of the reasons why we appointed the commission that you and Councillor Quinlan serve on is to actually get some research and some recommendations into possible alternatives for public safety. So hopefully we'll have some of those as we go into the budget season for FY 2022 that we can talk about and work on.
Other questions or comments from the council? Okay, seeing none. Roll call, please, Laura, on a positive recommendation.
Councillor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councillor Shara,
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Councillor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay, that moves forward with a positive recommendation. Next, we have 20.137. In order to rescind and replace FY 2021 Water Enterprise Fund budget, upon the recommendation of the mayor, ordered that the budget voted for the Water Enterprise Fund on June 18th, 2020 be rescinded and replaced with the following. The sum of $6,945,000, which is the full amount necessary for the fiscal year 2021 Water Enterprise Fund budget, July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021, be appropriated for the purposes stated, and to meet said appropriation, $5,767,732 is to be raised from water receipts. Sorry about my children. $577,268 shall be allocated to indirect costs, and $600,000 shall be transferred from the Water Stabilization Fund. So water general is $2,949,566. Water debt $1,684,863. Water interest $260,190. Water indirect costs $577,268. Water transfer to capital projects $1,471,113. For that total amount $6,945,000. Is there? Motion's been made
Seconded.
and seconded. Mayor Narcoitz.
So again, similar to our general fund revenues, this is basically taking the order that was in your FY 2021 budget books for water and then later for sewer, and basically mimic it in terms of maintaining the same level of budgetary services, but changing where some of the revenue is coming from. So obviously the 600,000 of the revenue that we had originally anticipated would come from water usage fees. It would now come basically out of the stabilization fund for the water utility. As probably won't come as a surprise, we've seen some significant drops in water usage from some of our larger customers. You've been reading the newspaper, you've been hearing about this happening in other communities. Amherst, for example, not having UMass fully in session, seen significant drops in their water revenue. For us, to a lesser degree, not having Smith College in session has resulted in significant reduction in their normal water usage. And you can go across and look at various other users, whether it's the YMCA or athletic clubs that typically have significant water usage, but being closed for so many months, that did not occur. And so even some of our restaurants and some of our retail establishments that were either closed or had limited hours, also we see reductions there as well. So the concern is the way the revenue is tracking, we won't have sufficient revenue from water enterprise to support the budget. So we're going to use what the stabilization funds are designed for, to stabilize the budget, to get us through FY 2021. And obviously, when we flip over to the other enterprise, just know that the sewer rate is set by the water consumption. So people's sewer bills are based on their water consumption. So obviously, it stands to reason that if your water consumption is coming in lower than had been projected, that transfers over to sewer. So we're requesting that basically we use $600,000 of our reserves to stabilize the water budget to get us through FY 2021.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the council?
Hotels are another big one, that are major water users. Think about the Hotel Northampton, or think about the Fairfield Inn, or any of these other hotels, which, people are showering and using the bathrooms. And if they've been closed, that's also a significant reduction in water usage. I think we're looking at some of those bills being, in the neighborhood of 70 to 80% below what their normal consumption rate would be. But again, if your hotel is closed, then that explains it.
Okay, Councilor Quinlan.
In terms of the $600,000, what percentage of what's in the stabilization fund is that? How much of it are we using for this?
Yeah, on the water stabilization, I think I have that written down. It still leaves us with quite a healthy balance. Actually, I'm going to ask, see if I can find that here. It's 22% of our water stabilization fund, and obviously every year we generate. There's always some additional funds, and we often come to you and say we want to move that into the water stabilization fund. So I think that fund would be at $2.7 million after that transfer. That was where it would leave it. So I think it would still leave us with a fairly healthy balance, I believe.
And with the enterprise stabilization funds, do those impact the bond rating as well? I know, and rightfully so, you're pretty proud of the bond rating that we've achieved in Northampton. And does this have an impact on that? Should we be thinking about that for the future as well?
I think the reason why we build strong reserves and build up our reserve funds is to be able to weather these types of fluctuations. And so if anything, on the recent bond rating call we had, this sort of just affirmed, we were finally in the middle of one of these situations that we're always planning for in terms of our reserves. So the fact that we're able to not really miss a beat and continue to run the utility and be able to, have healthy reserves that we can tap into. If anything, I think that just enhances our bond rating. So I don't see it affecting it. Obviously, we don't want to get into the habit of relying too much on these funds. But I do think that we're in a very unique situation with COVID, and even some of the institutions that were closed have since reopened. And I think we're going to see those numbers hopefully go back up in the future. So I think this is definitely a very isolated COVID-related incident. I frankly can't believe. I was thinking to myself, well, with everybody home, that maybe the residential water use would have gone up. But I'm not sure if we're all showering as much or what. I'm not sure. People are not showering as much. I'm not really sure what's going on. Maybe they're conserving water. I'm not really sure. But
I've noticed several councilors drinking water as you're speaking to try to help the situation.
Okay, well,
we all seem to go for
please drink faster. We need the revenue. So
then we have to take a recess. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I just want to be clear. So we had 2.7, so it'll be 2.1 after the transfer. So we'll have 2.1 million after the transfer.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay. Roll call, please, Laura, on a positive recommendation.
Councillor Shara.
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe.
Yes.
Councillor Labarge.
Yes.
And Councillor Quinlan.
Yes.
Okay, that moves to a positive recommendation. And next up, we have 20.13, in order to rescind and replace FY 2021 Sewer Enterprise Fund budget. Upon the recommendation of the mayor, ordered that the budget voted for the Sewer Enterprise Fund on June 18, 2020 be rescinded and replaced with the following: the sum of $6,177,500, which is the full amount necessary for the fiscal year 2021 Sewer Enterprise Fund budget, July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021, be appropriated for the purposes stated, and to meet said appropriation, $4,534,674 is to be raised from sewer receipts. $1,042,826 shall be as allocated to indirect costs, and $600,000 shall be transferred from the Sewer Enterprise Fund. So those are coming from sewer general sanitary, $1,051,250, sewer treatment, $2,270,734, sewer debt, $209,235, sewer interest, $61,804, sewer indirect cost, $1,042,826, sewer transfer to capital funds, capital projects, $1,594,651 for that total. Is there a motion?
Move to approve, please.
Motion's been made. Second?
So,
was there a second?
I think it.
I made the first motion.
I'll second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded perhaps many times now. Mayor Narcoitz.
Again, same scenario. We do, just to maybe anticipate Councillor Quinlan's question in terms of what this represents from our reserves. We have much larger sewer reserves because we've been building them up for some of the large projects we have, including, we're in the middle of an $11.5 million upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant. We've got a number of other large projects. So in the 600,000 represents only 5% of our stabilization fund. So we still maintain very healthy balances for those large capital projects we've been planning for. But again, the goal is to stabilize the utility during this COVID-related downturn.
Councillor Quinlan still got one for you.
No problem.
In terms of those large projects, that using some of this 600,000, you said it's 5%. Those projects will continue as planned.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and you may have seen that there's a new sign up at the wastewater treatment plant because we did receive the state Clean Water Trust funding or loan, low interest loan on the project. And they make you put up a sign. It's sort of like it's like the CPA. They make you put up a sign, saying this project funded by. So that's going to save us significantly in terms of interest payments, and we're even going to get a little bit of it forgiven as part of the project as well. But we still have, if you look at the capital plan, we've still got many other phases in terms of sewer upgrades to do. So having a down payment and a way to not have to necessarily borrow all of it, but having some actual cash to put towards some of these projects will be very helpful, which is why we've been making sure we build up our reserves in the sewer utility.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Nash. You're muted.
You're muted.
Well, I said thank you, and thank you, Council President, Mayor. So with this downturn in water usage and sewer usage, has it resulted in any changes in the way those two facilities work, or I guess you know what I'm saying is that if there's such a downturn, are there any savings there? Or are there different ways that these facilities operate? Or you just keep pumping out water and
Yeah.
processing?
No, yeah, no, really, these are 24/7 processing facilities, obviously on opposite ends of the water story. And so, no, it really doesn't really impact that. We've still got to, many of you counselors who went on the tours of both facilities, all of the same testing has to occur and all the same monitoring of pressure and monitoring of the reservoirs and wells and all those things happen. So, this is still a major utility that's handling many millions and millions of gallons. And so, it doesn't really, we can't really shut things down or shut parts of it down or any of those kinds of things. And then obviously on the stormwater side, we're basically, this is the final stop before our sewage goes into the Connecticut River. And so we have to do all the work in terms of purifying it and taking that brown beaker that you saw and turning it into the clear beaker that you saw before it does go out into the river. So there's really not savings to be found because of this.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions or comments? Okay, roll call, please, Laura.
Councillor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councillor Labarge,
Yes.
Councillor Quinlan,
Yes.
and Councillor Shara.
Yes. Okay, oh, Councillor Jarrett.
I'd like to request a short recess.
Okay. What time is it? Let's come back at, let's say, 9:20.
Let's all use the facilities so we can get that
Yes.
revenue back.
Boost it up. Okay. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are still in Finance Committee. And we are up to 20.140 in order to surplus land to abutters at Woodland Drive. Upon the recommendation of Mayor David J. Narcoitz and Planning and Sustainability. Whereas on April 6, 2020, City Council authorized the city to accept a deed for 1.906 plus or minus acres on Woodland Drive, map ID 42-131 for an affordable home, a workforce or market rate home, and a future walking and bicycling path, which the city acquired on May 13, 2020, book 13526, page 315. Whereas in conducting due diligence, there are one or more slivers of land which are not necessary for the above purposes and which could be sold to abutters if mutually agreeable terms could be worked out. Ordered that City Council declares such slivers of land surplus to city needs, and this mayor is authorized to transfer deeds for such surplus land. Further related or unrelated to selling such land, if the city is able to acquire deed or easements to extend the above referenced trail further east, the mayor is authorized to accept said deed or easements. Motion, please.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Quinlan, seconded by Councilor Thorpe.
One.
Other way around.
Other way
What?
around.
Oh, I'm sorry. Made by Councilor Thorpe, seconded by Councilor Quinlan. Mayor Markowitz.
I'm actually going to defer to our Director of Planning and Sustainability, Wayne Fiden, who's an expert in land slivers. So he can.
Please educate us on the sliver.
Yes.
Sure. I don't know if you noticed when Laura put the view up, the ordinance up, but the property is sort of shaped like a flagpole with a very short, a flag with a very short flagpole. That flagpole does us no good whatsoever. It would give the new homeowners, the responsibility to clear snow, and the abutter is very interested in getting that property. So we would sell the land to the abutter, just that flagpole, and then we'd be left with the square land. That's the only one which we know we want to do, but as we lay out homes and do more details, there could be an additional sliver of property which we'd also want to sell. And then the northerly part of the property, the original order allowed us to save an easement or some right of way in case you want to build a future trail. If a neighbor is willing to give us a portion of their property or sell us a portion of the property, you'd be granting us the right to buy that. That may or may not ever happen. This would give us the authority so we could negotiate.
Great. Any questions or comments? Councilor Labarge.
Wayne, on the so-called sliver, is it a flagpole lot that you're talking about, the sliver, or what is it, just a flagpole?
Yeah, it's not a flag lot as in a legal flag lot, but the property itself narrows down to, I don't know, something like 15 feet wide for a portion of land. So that 15 feet doesn't do us any good.
Are you talking about the first house on the corner?
That's correct. The land between that first house and Woodland Drive.
Okay. Have you had the surveyors out there yet making a determination on the property and so forth with the city?
No, we want to have your vote first because where we draw that line will depend on whether you give us authority or not. I didn't want to spend money on a survey and then not be able to go forward.
Okay. And the other sliver, where is that located?
Well, the same property owner whose fronts on West Hampton Road, he would like to buy some land behind his home that we're not ready to agree to yet because we have to lay out the lot. But if we can make it work and make him happy, we'd like to. But if we can't, we may not be able to go there.
Is that to give the city the opportunity to have the trails go through, or?
No, that extra sliver would really be to allow the neighbors to buy some land as a buffer for them to protect.
Okay. All right. I understand that. Thank you, Wayne.
Other questions? Okay. Seeing none, roll call please, Laura, on a positive recommendation.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan.
Yes.
Councilor Shara.
Yes.
And Councilor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, that moves forward with the positive recommendation. And we are at 20.141 in order to accept a $10,000 gift from DA Sullivan for Senior Services Technology Lending Program. Upon the recommendation of the mayor, ordered that the Northampton City Council gratefully accepts the donation of $10,000, a gift to the City of Northampton from DA Sullivan and Sons, Inc. In accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A, approves using the gifted funds for equipment and training services in support of the Senior Services Technology Lending Program, created in response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Thorpe. And Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Counselor. This is another in a series of gifts that the Sullivan family has been making on an annual basis to the city to fund various projects, either in schools or recreation, or in this case, senior services. And in speaking with Mark Sullivan this year about how best the gift could be used, we talked a little bit about the efforts that Marie Westberg and her staff have been doing to work with seniors who don't have access to technology. Obviously, they've been doing a lot of programming now via Zoom, like we're having this meeting, and teaching folks how to use Zoom to be able to get onto classes, or even just discussions, or an opportunity to be able to just chat with other seniors. And so they've gotten some small grants already to try to purchase devices that then they can lend out to seniors, including hotspots. And so the idea behind this gift was to be able to actually, establish a fund that senior services could use to purchase more devices going forward, and replace devices and purchase hotspots, and be able to work to get technology in the hands of seniors who may not be able to afford it in the near term. And again, this sort of has grown out of COVID-19 and the new reality that our most vulnerable population who can't be safely congregating in person, this allows them an opportunity to do that virtually.
So generous. Thank you. Actually, Councilor Nash and I had a conversation with Wayne actually about different possibilities for trying to expand that sort of access, particularly for seniors. So this is just so generous of DA Sullivan, as always. I saw hands. Councilor Labarge, then Councilor Nash.
I want to thank the DA Sullivan and Sons and family. They donated all our desks in the municipal building. I don't know what else they have donated, but this family, I commend them, because even I think Mark was on the planning board, wasn't he, Mayor, at that point?
Yep, he was the longtime chair for many years before he stepped down recently. And you're correct, they donated the desks in the council chambers, which are gathering dust low these 7 or 8 months. They also more recently donated the fully handicapped accessible water fountain in Pulaski Park that we installed to retro, and the water bottle filling station. They've also contributed to playground projects at schools. And it's just, they feel really strongly about giving back to the community. And so every year they check in about what are the types of projects that they could support. So this year it felt like supporting seniors in this way was a good use.
Right. I want to thank them and commend them for helping our city as a business. And I wish many more businesses would come forth and be like the Sullivan family. They are just unbelievable.
Councilor Nash.
Yeah, I want to thank the Sullivan family and for this donation and for this conversation, because I, like Counselor Shara, am having one of those connect the dots moment of like, oh, there is a program because there's a person we've been helping support to access these meetings, and I'm going to be reaching out to Marie Westberg tomorrow about seeing if this particular senior could benefit from this program. So thank you.
You're welcome. And we also not only provide the devices, but they've got some folks who are helping do training and tech support, if you will, for walking people through how to use and connect and set up hotspots, et cetera. So
for this particular individual, it would be a huge relief to have access to public meetings. We've been working all sorts of ways to accommodate this individual so they can participate. So anyway, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay, that moves forward with a positive recommendation, and we're at 20.142, in order to appropriate transportation infrastructure enhancement funds to Pine Street Bridge reconstruction. Whereas the city has received $18,148.20 from the Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure Enhancement Trust Fund for trips conducted by transportation network companies in Massachusetts for calendar year 2018 and 2019, and whereas the funds must be appropriated by City Council upon the recommendation and approval of the mayor, and whereas the funds must be used to address the impact of transportation network services on municipal roads, bridges, and other transportation infrastructure, or any other public purpose substantially related to the operation of transportation network services in the city or town. Ordered that the amount of $18,148.20 be appropriated from the Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure Enhancement Fund, Fund 2316, to be used for the costs related to the reconstruction of the Pine Street Bridge. Is there a motion? Motion was made by Councilor Thorpe, I think.
Quinlan.
Second by me.
Quinlan.
And seconded by Councilor Quinlan. Mayor Narkowitz.
So this is sort of the third year of receiving this money. This is basically there's a fee that's collected when people do ride sharing, and it comes back to municipalities, and it's to be used basically for your transportation system. And the whole idea is that as well adopted as ride sharing became with Uber and Lyft and these other services, it's pretty well recognized that the downside is that it's meant many more single vehicle trips on our roadways, and obviously causing congestion and obviously contributing to greenhouse gases, but also just causing wear and tear on our infrastructure. So we've been I think the first installment of it, we used it towards some paving, toward our paving fund. Again, relatively small amount of money. This year, we've been doing some work on the Pine Street Bridge. You may recall we came to you, I don't remember even now what month it was, but we've had to make some repairs following an inspection to the Pine Street Bridge. And so in talking to the DPW director about the most sort of pressing need and some costs that she has right now that this money could pay for, the Pine Street Bridge project seemed to be the most imminent in terms of a transportation infrastructure project where we could put this money to use immediately. So I'm essentially requesting, and we have to show the state that we're actually appropriating it to a transportation related project. So that's why I'm making this request that we're basically taking 2 years of it and sort of bundling it and appropriating it to the Pine Street Bridge project. And the only other question, I think it might be I'm not sure if we put it on the agenda, but if it's possible to request 2 readings in the main meeting, only because some of this work is winter sensitive, and the director would like to get. But that's more a question for the main meeting. I can't remember if we put that on the order or not. But
The request is on the agenda. So
excellent, great.
Questions or comments? Councillor Nash.
Mayor, where is the Pine Street Bridge?
It's, when you're when you're on Pine Street, when you're heading down from the center of Florence and you go past the Sojourner Truth Memorial and you go past Great Wall, and it's that little bridge. You may not even notice it's a bridge, but right, that takes you, over the Mill River and to the intersection of Spring Street and Florence Road. So it's right there.
Thank you.
Yep. But it's a.
How old is that bridge?
What's that?
How old is that bridge?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I can look it up. I have a lot of my head is filled with lots of facts. Some of them helpful, some of them useless. That's one I don't have at the tip of my tongue. So, but we can certainly look it up. But it's been a bridge that we've done some work on. We had to do some resurfacing a few years ago. You may remember. It's a small bridge, but it's a pain to shut down because it's such a heavily traveled route to your ward and to other wards. But you may have remembered that there were a couple of steel beam ends that were deteriorated that got picked up on a state inspection. So we've been doing a number of repair work to the bridge. Fortunately, we haven't had to close it for that, but we've been doing that to try to bring it back into compliance. I can find that out for you and get it to you.
Whenever.
Okay. It's water under the bridge, right? Sorry.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Corny jokes?
I'll be here all week.
Roll call, please, Laura.
Councillor Shara,
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councillor Labarge,
Yes.
and Councillor Quinlan.
Yes.
Okay, that moves forward with a positive recommendation, and we are at 20.143, in order to appropriate $3,000 in CPA funds for construction of Pine Grove Trails. This is upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee. Ordered that whereas the Office of Planning, Sustainability, and Conservation Commission submitted a small grants application for construction of a trail connection from Old Wilson Road to create public access to the Pine Grove section of the Rocky Hill Greenway. Whereas the project meets the goals of the Sustainable Northampton Plan, Northampton Community Preservation Plan, and Open Space, Recreation, and Multi-Use Trail to provide for passive recreation and promote further exploration, and contributes to public health by encouraging walking and hiking. Whereas on October 7, 2020, the Northampton Community Preservation Committee voted unanimously to recommend that $3,000 in Community Preservation Act funds be used to support this project. Now, therefore, be it ordered that $3,000 be appropriated from Community Preservation Act funding to the Pine Grove Trail Creation Project, and that the grantee meets the conditions approved by the Community Preservation Committee, the Mayor, and City Council. Specifically, $3,000 is appropriated from the CPA Open Space Reserve account. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Thorpe, and Sarah LaValle is here. Sarah?
All right. So the Community Preservation Committee has begun reviewing applications for the fall funding round, and they have 2 initial recommendations from the small grants and expedited review process in advance of the other recommendations that are going to be coming before you later this winter. And the first of these is the Pine Grove Trails project that's in front of you now as a small grant recommendation. So over the past several years, the city, in partnership with Mass Audubon, has created the Rocky Hill Greenway, which is a 200+ acre wildlife corridor that's part of an open space network that extends from the Connecticut River Oxbow and Arcadia Wildlife Sanctuary to the western part of the city. And when I first started working here about 10 years ago, this greenway didn't exist. So this is brand new and it's really exciting. And the most recent acquisition in the Rocky Hill Greenway is the Pine Grove Golf Course, which is currently in the process of being restored and reforested with the help of Community Preservation Act and also state grants. So when the area was a golf course, it was easily accessible through the parking area and existing cart paths. You could park at the parking lot and just walk out anywhere. But the parking area and the clubhouse remain in private ownership and is being developed, so that's no longer a viable access point, and the previous access isn't available anymore. And in addition, the fairways that were mown regularly and were easily accessible are no longer being mowed and maintained, and a dedicated trail system is being created for easy public access. There's lots of cart paths on the property, so this is a lot easier than most of the properties that we work with. But this initial small grant application to the Office of Planning and Sustainability will allow a trail to be created from Old Wilson Road to connect to that cart path network, which will then also collect to the larger Rocky Hill Greenway.
Thank you for that explanation. Are there questions or comments? Councillor Labarge.
Sarah, the property to the right where the Gulf Coast houses, and there's there's a house below. All those lots, 4 lots have been sold, correct?
Yes, so those were retained in private ownership and
Right.
aren't owned by the city.
So they're sold.
Yes.
All right. So this $3,000 we're looking at now doing the trails, because I because I have friends that live on Pine Valley. And where are you going to start this?
So this initial trail will connect from just northeast of the current brook to the cart path system. So as the fairways are growing in, there's not a great access point currently for people to get to the rest of the property. So this will allow them to easily access that.
Okay. I know at one point there were tons of turkeys out there and deers. And when I had talked with Wayne about that, because they're absolutely beautiful out there, lately we haven't been seeing them. And he said, once we start revitalizing that property, the wetlands out there, they'll bring them all back again. They'll all come back. So I was happy to hear that.
Great. More turkeys and deers. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Roll call, please, Laura. Thank you, Sarah.
Councillor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councillor Labarge,
Yes.
Councillor Quinlan,
Yes.
and Councillor Shara.
Yes. Okay, that moves forward with a positive recommendation, and we're at 20.144, in order to appropriate $65,000 in CPA funds for water-based recreation assessment project. Upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, ordered that whereas the Office of Planning and Sustainability submitted an expedited application for a feasibility study to assess existing informal swimming areas on the Mill and Connecticut rivers, identify possible improvements, and create preliminary designs for such improvements sufficient to apply for outside grants. Whereas the project meets high priority goals of the Sustainable Northampton Plan, Northampton Community Preservation Plan, and Open Space Recreation and Multi-Use Trail Plan by furthering creation of water-based recreation facilities. Whereas on October 21st, 2020, the Northampton Community Preservation Committee voted to recommend that $65,000 in Community Preservation Act funds be used to support this project. Now, therefore, be it ordered that $65,000 be appropriated from Community Preservation Act funding to the water-based recreation assessment project, and that the grantee meets the conditions approved by the Community Preservation Committee, the Mayor, and City Council. Specifically, $65,000 is appropriated from the CPA budgeted reserve. Okay, motion, please.
Motion.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Labarge and seconded by Councilor Thorpe, I think. And Sarah, would you like to talk about this?
Sure. So Wayne, I believe, is still here and should be available to answer detailed questions about the larger project, but I'll give you a summary of the CPA process. So as I mentioned, the CPA usually recommends projects in a bundle of recommendations that come before you later in the winter. The two ways that projects can come before you sooner are the small grants process, which is a little bit simpler, and also expedited review, which is a way that applicants who have a time-sensitive issue can begin to move forward with their projects a little bit faster. So the Office of Planning and Sustainability submitted an application to begin moving forward with a water recreation assessment to start looking at some of the informal swimming areas in the city and the need that has really been called out, especially this summer with COVID, for additional swimming areas and opportunities there to hopefully be ready for grant applications next summer.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments? Councilor Nash.
This is so great, so timely. We, I know other counselors who have sat in on meetings around this are really excited that we're moving forward with having, these plans made, and nice work to both you, Sarah, and Wayne, and getting in the planning department. Thank you.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes, I am very pleased. I've even talked to Wayne about this. This is an absolutely necessary assessment that we need to have done. And I think with Sarah and Wayne and the CPA money, it's going to come a long way. And I think working very tirelessly on this, and we're going to solve the problems that we've had throughout the summer. And I support this.
Okay, Councilor Jarrett.
Yeah, thank you for your work on this. Ward 5 has certainly seen the increase in the use of water-based recreation and the conflicts that can occur, and fully in support of the long-term work, which I think will bring a bigger variety of opportunities, and in those including in those opportunities, those that don't require payment, so that there can be accessibility for all. Thank you.
Councilor Maori.
Yes, as you all know, we've definitely struggled in Leeds over the summer with recreational issues, and having kind of proper and formal sites so that they can be more planful, and the use of them can be more planful. I do hope that we have river stewards eventually in our city around these. I think it's actually a quite cost effective and kind of a culturally informed way to deal with some of the issues that are coming up around trash and usage. I would be curious to eventually see a breakdown of where the money will be going specifically. Is that part? I guess Wayne, I could look at the proposal at some point, or.
Yeah, I mean, remember, this is only study money, and it's only get to the first step of applying for grants. So it'd be for a single firm. It would be all to a landscape architect and an engineering firm. Landscape architect to help with the visioning, and engineer to help with enough of a plan that we could apply for grants. Exactly what the mix will be between sort of the 4 Mill River sites that we're talking about, simple interventions, and the Connecticut River, which could be deeper intervention. I'm not sure in terms of the hours that would go into both, but it would be one contract with a vendor.
Okay, I see. Thank you. That's helpful. Yes, I'm really glad for this, and I thought your presentation was really detailed and thoughtful.
I see another hand. Okay. This is definitely an exciting step forward. All right, roll call, please. Laura.
Labarge.
Councilor Labarge, I don't know if we can hear you.
I didn't hear her.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry, Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe.
Yes.
Great. That moves forward with a positive recommendation. And that brings us to the end of the finance agenda. Is there a motion?
Move to adjourn finance.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn finance. Roll call, please, Laura, on adjourning.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay, we've adjourned finance and we're back in council. And here we are again. We're at 20.135 in order to declare surplus and authorize sale of 593 Elm Street. So again, Councilor Thorpe has recused himself. And this is on first reading.
Move to approve.
Motion's been made by Councilor Labarge and seconded by
Second.
Councilor Jarrett. Any discussion on first reading? Okay, roll call, please, Laura.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Foster,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
and Councilor Shara.
Yes. That passes in first reading. And we're at 20.136 in order to make changes to the FY 2021 general fund budget to balance the FY 2021 budget.
Move to approve.
Move. Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Dwight. Any discussion on this first reading? Okay, roll call, please, Laura.
Councilor Foster,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Councilor Dwight.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in first reading, and we are at 20.137 in order to rescind and replace FY 2021 Water Enterprise Fund budget.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilor Labarge, and I'm not sure there was a
I heard
duet.
Councilor Dwight.
Double header.
Okay. Discussion on first reading. Roll call, please, Laura.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
and Councilor Foster.
Yes.
All right, that passes in first reading. We're going to ask you not to gesture on the next one, which is 20.138, in order to rescind and replace FY 2021 Sewer Enterprise Fund budget. First reading, was there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second it. Whatever.
Oh dear. A motion's been made and seconded. Discussion. Roll call, please, Laura.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Mr. Quinlan?
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Foster,
Oh, yes.
and Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
All right, that passes in first reading. Next is 20.140, in order to surplus land to abutters at Woodland Drive.
Move to approve.
Motion's been made. Seconded by who? Who was it? Fess up.
Whoever wants it. I said it. So.
Counselor Thorpe. Okay, discussion on first reading. Counselor Jarrett.
Is Director Fiden still with us?
Yes.
I noticed that I just looked on the street view of this area, noticed that this sliver of land does have a number of trees on it. They're not that big. I guess, is there any concern with that the new owners may cut down those trees, or just, that sounds like that, if we sold that, they would have the right to do that. So just wanted to raise that issue. And
we didn't have any conversation about the trees. I know that they generally are interested in this just to protect themselves. So they were worried if the land was sold to someone else that they might be exposed. So as far as I know, they have no plans, but I didn't discuss it with them specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments? Okay, roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
yes.
and Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in first reading. 20.141, in order to accept $10,000 gift from DA Sullivan for Senior Services Technology Lending Program. Motion
Move approval, please.
Second.
made by Counselor Dwight and seconded by Counselor Labarge. Discussion on first reading. Counselor Foster.
I just wanted to echo the gratitude I heard in the committee meeting of the generosity from the Sullivan family. It's really wonderful.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments or discussion? Okay, roll call please on this generous gift.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
and Counselor Maori.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in first reading. And we are at 20.142, in order to appropriate transportation infrastructure enhancement funds to Pine Street Bridge reconstruction.
Move to approve.
Motion's been made by Councilor Labarge. Seconded by Councilor Maori. Seconded by Councilor Maori. Discussion on first reading. Okay. Hearing none, roll call please, Laura.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
and Counselor Nash.
Yes.
Okay, that passes on first reading, and there's a request.
Second.
Motion
Whatever
been
that was.
made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Dwight to suspend rules. Discussion on suspension of rules. Roll call on suspending rules, please, Laura.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
and Counselor Quinlan.
Yes.
Rules are
Move
suspended.
second reading, please. Move second reading, please.
Motion made by Councilor Dwight.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Foster. Discussion on second reading. Roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
and Counselor Shara.
Yes, that passes in 2 readings. And we are at 20.143 in order to appropriate $3,000 in CPA funds for construction of Pine Grove Trails.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Labarge, seconded by Counselor Thorpe. Discussion. Seeing none, roll call please, Laura.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Oh, yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
and Counselor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in first reading, and we're at 20.144 in order to appropriate $65,000 in CPA funds for water-based recreation assessment project. Counselor Foster.
Yes, I'm going to need to recuse from this discussion as the executive director of All Out Adventures. We run regular programs and hold a permit to work at one of the locations under consideration here.
Thank you. So Counselor Foster herself.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's made by Counselor Dwight, seconded by Counselor Labarge. Discussion. Okay, roll call please.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Counselor Dwight.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in first reading, and now we're moving on to financial orders on second reading. We have 20.134 in order to appropriate funds to complete the stormwater analysis Beaver Brook Estates in Leeds.
Counselor Sierra, I need to recuse myself, please.
Counselor Labarge is recused.
Move approval, please.
Motion's been made by Counselor Dwight.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Foster. Discussion. Counselor Quinlan.
You know, so Mr. Melnik was here tonight in public comment, and I was thinking a lot about what he was saying in terms of that this maybe wasn't a council issue. So I'm really was thinking back on in March and April, we had a pretty great discussion about changing a zoning ordinance around non-conforming lots. And one of the arguments made was that we would be, as a council, leaning on the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Board to take a little firmer look at some things before they pass them off to us. So I'm curious about the rest of the council, what you think here, because it's given me pause to think about this. I read the emails this week from Mr. Melnik and then the follow-up from our DPW director. And I thought the DPW director's response was very appropriate. I thought that it was correct. But again, I wondered if, based on Mr. Melnik's comment earlier, if this wasn't something that another board should be taking a little sharper look at than us.
Mayor Norquist, did you want to respond?
I was reminding folks that, you know, by statute, you are the body that controls this fund, or the ability to take money out of this fund. And I mean, we do have a zoning board of appeals and we do have other planning bodies, but this is, you're the only body that can adjudicate this particular issue that you're being asked to adjudicate. You're not being asked to rule on zoning or rule on anything other than just allowing the planning board to access these funds to try to make sure that the homeowners who purchased, these properties in this development have a functioning stormwater system that can actually be certified. So similar to what you did more recently with the with the project up on Village Hill, where the developer left sort of a project unfinished and sort of left the neighbors, or the neighborhood, or those who were there with a problematic system. And so we basically had to step in and address it. So, but we do have Donald Escalia on the call, and we do have Mr. Fiden on the call. So if there are other questions, I know, again, I know that the attorney Melnik said that this is not you shouldn't be involved in this, but actually you're the only authority that can be involved in this particular question. And again, there's precedent, just several months ago with the project at Village Hill.
I see Councillor Jarrett and then Councillor Nash.
Would anyone be able to explain what Mr. Melnik is talking about as far as the zoning board and the courts? Well,
I think that obviously the issue, I'm unclear about the zoning board typically is a place you go if there is typically rulings of the building inspector can be appealed to the zoning board. Obviously the zoning board does issue findings and other matters within their jurisdiction, but as in terms of their true appellate role, it's usually rulings of the building inspector that can be brought to the zoning board. I really think that this would ultimately be a court matter. He mentioned going to Superior Court, and that's his right, obviously, to do that at any point. But from the city's perspective, he was issued a duly issued permit that had requirements, I know that he referred to his engineer, but actually that's sort of at the heart of the matter here, is that we require an actual engineer stamped, certified responses to the things we need to understand. And to date, he has not produced that. And so that's really where we're at odds. And so, again, I'm not really sure where the litigation would come in, but obviously you can litigate anything. So you can go to Superior Court over just about anything. Mr. Fiden may be able to answer that from a zoning question in terms of how the ZBA would work here. So I could defer to him on that.
Yeah, everything the mayor said is absolutely correct. I just want to expand in one area. So if he was going to file some sort of legal action, it would be based on the planning board's action. The problem is, and as the mayor said, this is almost identical to Northview in the sense of we rarely take performance guarantees, but when a developer isn't delivering what they have to do, that's when we do that. There's one difference between this and Northview, which is we typically notify a property owner when we're going to take the money that we hold in trust for them. In the case of Northview, the action that we took to collect the money was to write Florence Bank and make a demand that the performance guarantee be turned over to the city. And planning board can do that without going to city council. So the final definitive piece was to give that demand. And before we did that demand, actually we wrote the Florence Bank and said, we plan to call this in, I think it's 30 days, unless the developer completes the project. Developer didn't do that, and we called it, and then we came to city council for the right to spend the money. The only difference in this case is we already hold the money. So the normal, Pat Melnik specifically asked for a definitive statement from the city. We can't do that without your authority, because right now we already hold the money, and he can come before the planning board, and the planning board says no, but he could come back the next day with a revised plan. So the planning board can basically never give a definitive statement because they already hold the money. So the only definitive action is to actually have authority to spend the money. So to be clear, I mean, there's a challenge in court. I'm not a lawyer, but there's a challenge of you have to exhaust your administrative remedies before you go to court. His administrative remedy is to come back to the planning board every single week and say, can you release me now? And the planning board is going to say no, but they're never going to say we wouldn't release it next week. You could come back with more information. So the definitive statement is when we say, we now have the authority to spend your money, we will spend the money in 14 days or 21 days or 30 days, unless you collect this process, unless you correct the problem.
So Director Fiden, are you saying that for him to pursue the courts, this would actually have to happen first? This council vote? Or?
I don't know. I mean, I can't speak. I'm no lawyer, so I can't speak whether he could go to court. But his specific request to you in public comment was a definitive denial letter. I don't think we could issue that letter.
Okay.
It has to exhaust the remedy. It just has to make one change.
Thank you.
Councilor Nash.
Thank you, Council President. So I just want to say that based on the documentation provided by Director LaScalia and just my awareness of the history of what's gone on here, I'm inclined to release funds, to vote to release these funds tonight. My only concern is based on Mr. Melnik's account that he only learned about this later in the process. Makes me, that's his claim, and that makes me wonder if we voted to continue tonight, it would provide an additional 2 weeks. And I wonder if either the mayor or Wayne or Mr. Fiden or Director LaScalia thinks that any additional time like that might bring about a resolution, because we have a bit, I interpret this as kind of a standoff, and that I'm thinking of the residents who now currently own those properties up there, that this needs to be resolved. And that's why we hold these monies. It's actually to protect them, to make sure that due diligence is done around these plans. So I'm just putting that out to the mayor and staff. If an additional 2 weeks might help in bringing about some sort of agreement. I was hoping Mr. Melnik would stay on the line. I see he's not in the room right now, but so that's my thought.
Go ahead.
I can't speak for Mr. Melnik, but again, his specific request in public comment was we issue a denial letter.
Right.
If the period is delayed, we're not going to take any action unless he comes to the table and says he can correct the problem. The next letter we would write is, once you gave us authority to spend the money, we would write him formally and say, we have authority to spend the money. Here's your last chance to meet these standards. So if what he really wants is that denial letter, we won't be able to do that till you act. If something else would get him going, then that would be great.
So
and again, I've talked to the solicitor about this. There's no, there's no violation of notice or anything like that. There's no notice requirement. And again, I would say, it's always a little bit hard when someone's at a meeting telling you they didn't know anything about the meeting. But clearly he's at the meeting and he knows about it, and the DPW has been corresponding with him about this issue for many, many, many years. And the fact that this has sort of gotten his attention, I think, is important. And I hope it does draw a resolution, but I don't think 2 weeks. I think the fact that these monies would be available will hopefully draw a quick resolution. Because 2 weeks, we're going to be right where we were. And as Director Fiden said, what he's asking for as the resolution is not a resolution in the city's view. The resolution is to perform, to provide the information that when you were issued the permit, you said you would provide. That's what's at issue here. So I just feel like not much will change in 2 weeks. And again, even if you release the money, it's unlike, we could talk next week. I just feel that I don't think that's going to advance it.
So can I ask one further question to follow up on that? So if we release the monies, there's obviously going to be a delay in there anyway, because we don't have the engine. Do we have the engineer lined up to go and do this?
No,
So he has
no.
time to intervene.
Yes. And we don't want to do this. I mean, this is not, we don't want to do this, just like we didn't want to do it in the Northview. This is like an extreme last resort. And frankly, you know, the money would go much further if it wasn't a public project, because if we step in, then it becomes a public project. So, yeah, so this isn't going to happen tomorrow, or, you know, it's going to take a while for this to happen. I mean, Director LaScalia or Wayne could probably speak to that better, but you know, certainly there'll be time, but I do think it's important that, you know, we advance this to the next step, because we've been corresponding about this for quite some time.
Director LaScalia.
Yes, good evening to everyone. It is definitely my preference that Mr. Melnik provides the information that we have been requesting for years, actually. That's what we want. This is not something that my department wants to take on or manage. It's certainly, you know, we want to spend our time, you know, engaged in other projects and not engaged in a private development here. But we want to ensure this is done properly. But this is not something that we actually want to manage. So what we're looking for from Mr. Melnik is information. It is possible that he has done everything that he needs to do. We just don't know that because he won't provide us the information we have repeatedly requested. And again, you know, we have a very long paper trail of this documentation. So what I need from Mr. Melnik is the communication that we have been requesting. And if he's already done it, that's great. I just need to see the paper. I need something from an engineer. And again, that is our preference.
Councillor Dwight.
All of you have answered my initial question, which was going to be, I mean, what level of communication has occurred between you and Mr. Melnik, and it appears, and as I recall, Carolyn describing that this has been a long, ongoing process. And the reason an escrow account exists, the reason escrow is to assure compliance to the conditions and terms that essentially are a contract, and that is the part that is decided in courts, depending on if the contract was made in bad in bad form, if the city is violated in some way. But our responsibility is just to release funds based on, because we have fiduciary oversight, our job is to determine whether it's appropriate to do as the DPW and the planning board have requested, that we invoke the only agency or the only system that can, our last resort is to make him comply. So what we've got left is the escrow account, and I you know, Mr. Melnik, the rest of it is not the rest of the legal stuff is not up to us, but we do, after hearing the case made by the both directors of planning and of the DPW, I'm inclined to vote in favor of this in second reading, to invoke the conditions of the escrow account.
Councillor Maori.
No. Yeah, I have a few questions. I'll try to focus here. I mean, I as the Ward 7 representative, I did alert Mr. Melnik to this meeting, so he wasn't at the first. So I hear that he didn't know about the specific process. But what I'm also seeing is like 8 years, that's a long time, and no longer, right? Since 2008. And there's an issue of like not accepting the premise, which is making it really complex. I don't think he, so Director Lascoli, are you saying it sounds like he just never answered, or he just disagreed with the premise of what you were asking? I'm just curious, really.
I will try to answer that question to the best of my ability.
It's okay. It might not be the right question. I have another one, but try.
I mean, the stormwater permit is clear. We are issuing a permit and putting requirements on permittees in accordance with state standards. We don't list every single state standard in our permit, much like in a building permit. We don't say, well, you have to have a door and you have to have a doorknob, and you know, we don't really get to that granular level of detail when we issue a permit. But when we ask for information to satisfy our permit requirements, I think that part of the nuance here is a misunderstanding of the fact that, you know, this granular level of detail is not in the permit, but we are trying to satisfy the state standards for stormwater with this project to ensure that the project has been constructed properly for the benefit of the city and the residents. So with that being said, I think that the lack of information that has been provided to us may be a misunderstanding of the detail level within the permit. But at the end of the day, the DPW is within its rights to hold permittees to the state standards. And that's what we are doing. And we do that for everybody's protection. And we do that to ensure a quality project that will actually hold up over time and not fail for the people who have bought into this project. So at this point, the information vacuum that we are in puts us in a position where we are really in a state of paralysis. We are not able to entertain any amendment to this permit because we have really basic requirements that are not being satisfied. I will also mention that part of the permit requirement is an annual report on October 1st of every year. I do not have an annual report, and it's past October 1st. So there's sort of a lengthy story here, but the bottom line is the state standards are upheld, and we are the authority that upholds those state standards, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Okay, that's actually quite helpful. Thank you. I just, it's complex, so I wanted to make sure that that's what I was gathering from the correspondence. I guess on a, on a kind of moving forward level, kind of what Councilor Nash was saying. I mean, we vote tonight, and then there's, and if it goes forward, is there opportunity for recourse here? I mean, I know that I believe that Mr. Melnik's engineer actually passed away, and I'm not sure who certifies who does the certification. Is it any engineer, or does it have to be a state engineer, or?
I need an engineer licensed in the Commonwealth, correct?
Okay, right. So it doesn't have to be a city engineer. I mean, city.
Massachusetts
Okay.
engineer.
So in any case, so I believe, I might not be correct about this, that he doesn't actually have an engineer. So I'm just thinking, like, what's the time? And so if he wanted to remedy this issue, would there be time after this vote, if it was positively voted on, for him to do so? It sounds like that's what you would strongly prefer. But I was trying to picture the time frame if he has to hire an engineer or whatever the issue might be there. But practically,
I think I want to be very clear with everybody that it is my preference that Mr. Melnik produces the information that we have been requesting. I do not want to use city resources to pursue this. That's not an avenue I'm interested in going down. So I am more than happy to work with him on this. But again, it has dragged on for a really extended time period. So we do have to be reasonable here.
Right. So I guess if barring no change in that you would have to pursue hiring an engineer, the city would. What would the time frame be? Is that something that happens quickly, or is it happen I'm just curious like how long that would, if you get no response from Mr. Melnik?
Yeah, there can certainly be a lag time in engaging an engineering firm to do something like this, but I would anticipate that we would start that process and have some resolution in 60 to 90 days.
Okay, thank you. That's quite helpful. Thank you, Director.
Councilor Quinlan.
I just want to say that, I was curious about this, and I feel like as a group, we've asked a lot of good questions, and to the mayor and to the two directors, I think the responses have been completely appropriate, and they put me in the position where I would support taking this this funding to get this job done. Unfortunately, maybe
Other questions or comments? Okay. Councilor Maori?
Yes, I just wanted to add something, which is, I believe, I forgot who brought this up, but we have to be mindful of the residents up there in Beaverbrook, and that if this isn't dealt with, it could potentially fall back on the homeowners association up there. Just to put that stakeholder in there.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Okay. Thank you, Director Lascalia, for joining us, and Director Fiden as well. Laura, roll call, please, on second reading.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Foster,
Yes.
and Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in second reading. We're moving to ordinances for referral. There's 20.139, an ordinance to add section 285-31 newspaper boxes.
Move to refer to legislative matters, please.
Motion's been made by Councilor Dwight, seconded by Councilor Thorpe to refer to legislative matters. Any discussion on referral?
Can I just ask?
Councilor Foster.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to wait to be recognized. Just a point of clarification. I had pulled up the agenda for legislative matters earlier, and it looks like this will be discussed at the upcoming meeting. That was the intent. Okay.
So
yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So was your question
Monday.
was why it was on the agenda before? Laura anticipates if it had been referred to something in addition to legislative matters, it would have been not discussed at legislative matters. But Laura is so good at organizing us. She tries to anticipate this. And so obviously at this time, this would be past the time to be able to put it on that agenda. So she tries to.
Sorry. Very
organized. That's great. Thank you. I was anticipating it being further out. So thank you for that.
It'll be on the meeting on Monday, just so you know. It's coming up Monday. Monday.
Okay, let's refer it first. Any discussion on referring it? Okay, roll call please on the referral.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Foster,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
So we
come
Councilor
back
Labarge.
from
You there,
recusal.
Councilor Labarge? We've moved on. You can come back. We may have,
You stepped away or,
yeah.
okay. Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Okay, so now it will be on the agenda on Monday. Moving on to ordinances, we have 20.121, an ordinance to amend section 5.3 to reduce the setback from street lot lines for accessory stables. This went to planning board and legislative matters and received positive recommendations from both. Why don't I read it and then we'll get a motion. So this is upon the recommendation of Building Department and Office of Planning and Sustainability. An ordinance of the City of Northampton, Massachusetts, part of Chapter 350, 4.3 Code of Ordinances, City of Northampton, Massachusetts, be amended to reduce the setback from street lot lines for accessory stables. So we're going to modify this section. So 5.3 accessory uses keeping. So this is what it says now: the keeping of farm animals to include all farm animals and exotics, and a related private stable for personal use is permitted as an accessory use in accordance with the following conditions. 3, the location of any stable shall, now we're adding not, be less, and then we're taking out that 100 feet from any street lot line, not less. So now it says shall not be less than 30 feet from any lot line.
Move approval, please.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Dwight and I think seconded by Councilor Maori. Discussion. Councilor Dwight.
It's Carolyn. Is Carolyn here still?
No, I don't see Carolyn. No.
I had called Director Fiden earlier today with a question about the previous agenda item, and he had said Carolyn wouldn't be here tonight, that he would be here to speak.
Oh, right. And but it's okay. We did have this discussion in legislative matters, and essentially this is one of those anomaly zoning things that maybe made sense back in the day, and no one seems to know what day that was actually. But the fact is that in every other circumstance, the setbacks, as you'll note, are 30 feet everywhere else on a lot except for one that abuts on a road, and it's 100 feet, which is pretty substantial, and no one really can quite understand what the reason for that was. Maybe to keep animals out of sight from the streetscape. I don't know. The fact is that it doesn't come up a lot. It really doesn't lend itself to a problem anymore, as if it were ever a problem. But there is an applicant who lives on a corner, so that means essentially 100 feet. It renders a stable impossible for something that for a resident who basically conforms in every other way and meets all the other conditions. So this is just simply a correction that, and we came to understand that it was something we do periodically as we make up for things that were decided maybe 100 years ago. We don't know. So, well, no, not in that case. If it's a setback laws, wasn't 100 years ago. But in any event, there was no opposition to the proposal. So that's, and I think that's it in a nutshell.
Right. There are no nays. There were no nays.
Right.
Oh, wow. You guys are really going for it.
Oh!
I lose impulse control when it gets later. Sorry.
Any discussion? Okay.
There shouldn't be after that.
Laura, roll call, please.
Councilor Quinlan.
Yes.
Councilor Shara.
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe.
Yes.
Councilor Dwight.
Yes.
Councilor Foster.
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash.
Yes.
All right, that passes in first reading. Our last item on the agenda is to deliberate and vote on Community Resources request to suspend Council Rule 2.6.2.6.1, requiring reporting within 60 days and to refer 20.11 for plastic reduction and sustainability ordinance to the Disability Commission. So, Councilor Jarrett.
I'm just going to recuse myself because we're discussing this plastic reduction ordinance, and there may be a conflict. There may be a conflict of interest.
Okay. Councilor Jarrett is recused.
Move approval, please.
Second.
Okay, been made and seconded. Just to kind of frame it for everybody. So the Plastic Reduction and Sustainability Ordinance is with the Community Resources Committee, where they've been having an in-depth discussion and gathering information. And they have a public forum, which is scheduled for November 16th, which brings them just past the 60-day deadline for reporting out of committee, which is in our rules. And our rules are very clear that reporting means giving a recommendation, so a positive, a negative, or a neutral recommendation. So what they would like to do is have that forum and then vote on a recommendation after that forum. So it's my interpretation that we need to suspend the rule that requires a report within 60 days to allow them to do that. So that, and Councilor Nash, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, or Councilor Dwight.
Well, I just want to comment that this is unprecedented. So just so it's clear that the reason that we're making this unprecedented proposal is that this ordinance, no one's trying to ram anything through and no one's trying to hamstring anybody. This is being very thoroughly vetted, more thoroughly vetted than many ordinances that we've seen in the past, with a lot of outreach. And as such, the reason we have this rule is that we don't do with this what, for instance, the legislature did with the Roe Act. You don't throw it in the committee and then let it die there and let it molder there without any action. We require a 60-day clock to move items through to be addressed by the council and voted on. You can't bury it in the committee. And it's good. It's a very good rule, and I wish the state would take our cue. That said, the due diligence that's been done with Councilor Nash's committee and by the Youth Commission and by another number of members of the community who are deeply vested in this, including the business owners. One of the is very commendable, but one of the things, the pushback that we got was, of course, there wasn't enough outreach. And I just want to go on the record that the Youth Commission worked a year and a half on outreach, contacting and communicating with virtually every business that they could come up with that would that actually used to-go containers and the like. Their response was anemic. When they actually did get a response, the people were very helpful, but the fact is that outreach was attempted. It didn't make it much in some folks' priority until it became actually an ordinance. So I'm grateful that everyone's participating in the conversation, and that and in fact, I believe the ordinance will come out even better as a result. But I just want to emphasize that we've never done this before. We've never done this before. And we are doing it in good faith. And I'm grateful for all the work that everyone's put into this.
Councilor Maori.
Right. I feel compelled to let everyone know what a stand-up job Councilor Nash has been doing on this. I mean, he's been going endlessly up and down to establishment and engaging in really meaningful conversations with businesses. And I deeply appreciate it. I deeply appreciate the whole process, and I'm learning this whole process. And I think the reason I didn't know that this was unprecedented, but I mean, with the pandemic happening, we really need to really thoroughly make sure this will work. And so that the impact, once it is passed, is that it is very implementable and it's doable, and we've foreseen issues. So that's why I think this is particularly because of the pandemic, I think, and the stress on businesses. I think it's incumbent upon us to do this and take our time with it. Then thank you, Councilor Nash.
Thank you.
Councilor Nash.
Yeah, so thank you for the kind words and for acknowledging my unprecedented request here, and that you know, we have been having some really productive discussions. We're gathering a lot of information, and that I'm finally reaching the point where I think I really actually understand most of the ordinance. It's actually very complex, all of the different materials and the different ways that it'll play out for businesses. Most importantly, that the approach that we've been taking is to, rather than just have a hearing back at our first meeting to say yes or no and send it forward with a recommendation, is to actually engage the business community so we have an informed discussion. And that because of the technical nature of these containers, it's really hard to engage a lot of people in it. There are some businesses that are like Belly of the Beast and Woodstar and Harold's. They're really up on what it is they're using. But then there's other businesses that are they're just buying what their suppliers are providing to them, and that's what's going out the door. I will say this, that first of all, I want to commend the Youth Commission that we've basically been partnered up on doing the outreach here. And in fact, the Youth Commission's been doing a lot of heavy lifting around this. And so we have actually been using our resources to help them out. And that I mentioned earlier that they've had I don't know if I mentioned, they've had 5 meetings with the business community via Zoom. They've had regular contact with Amy Kaline, and we've developed flyers, and I've been working with them to engage door to door as requested by some of the businesses downtown, saying that you need to do this kind of outreach. And been working with Rena Pai and Marty Nathan. They've also been helping with that outreach. Last Saturday, the Youth Commission flyered Florence to the food businesses there. And that what we're discovering is that the people, you know what, I don't want to summarize too much. I will say that the outreach has been effective, and that we can, you know, my goal is that when it comes to council, that people will be informed about what's going on here. There will be no surprises, and they'll be able to talk to what is in this ordinance, and there won't, I don't expect people coming into the room and saying, I didn't know this was going on. So I would appreciate the extension, and I think that the outreach will be fruitful for all of council. Thank you.
Councilor Dwight.
Point of information, simply, this also includes a referral, and I should probably make that part of my motion to refer this to the Disability Committee as well.
Yeah, I mean, so does someone want to speak to that request? We could separate them out as two separate motions.
Just so that it's not an agenda item, so a separate agenda item. So I don't know if I should include it in my motion. And the Disability Commission, not committee. I should emphasize it is a commission.
Okay. Councilor Nash.
Well, to that piece, I completely support that. one of the things we during our outreach, from both people in the community, customers in the community, and from the businesses, concern about having the actual materials to be able to, to sell products to all sorts of people who have different needs. So, and I think that the Disability Commission would be able to provide us some really clear guidelines around, what would be great accommodations in terms of the exemptions that are considered within this ordinance.
Councilor Dwight.
For clarity's sake, I mean, principally the focus, ADA focus would be about the use of straws, flexible straws. Just so everyone's clear, it's not, and that if someone's wondering why we would refer this to the Disability Commission, just so they know.
Okay. And it can, just so also for people's information, it can be at the Disability Commission and also be at Community Resources at the same time.
Yes.
So this will not be delaying this process. Councilor Nash?
Yeah, I'm not expecting it to go beyond straws, but I would not rule it out in terms of what people's needs are, because that's why we're asking them to weigh in. Is there anything we're missing? And so.
Okay. Councilor Foster.
I would like to echo the thank you for Councilor Nash for his hard work on this, and Councilors Maori and Dwight and the Youth Commission. It's been, I know it's been an awful lot of hard work, and just wanted to support the extension. I understand the urgency of moving this forward, and at the same time, a process that's truly collaborative, that has pulled in, that has gathered and solicited the feedback from the Disability Commission, as well as the extent of the outreach to the downtown businesses, I think is really critical on this one. And I believe I didn't realize it was unprecedented either, but I believe it's worth the extra time, and you definitely support this.
Thank you. So Councilor Dwight, do you want to add in this referral to your motion?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I would like to, and if whoever I forgot who seconded it, was an hour and a half ago, but if they'd agreed, I'd appreciate it.
Does the seconder say again?
I believe it was Councilor Thorpe.
You down with that? Okay, good.
All good.
Councilor Nash.
Okay.
Yeah, so since we're extending the deadline, I'd like to know what the deadline is. So is the goal for the next council meeting to have a recommendation, or do we want to do a 30-day, or how do we want to handle this?
Well, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that the plan was that you would vote on a recommendation after the forum on the same day. Is that incorrect?
That is the plan.
Then it would be till the 16th.
The 16th. Okay. And then reporting to council on, what is it, the 17th? No, 17th, 18th, the 18th.
19th.
19th. Okay.
But it has to go back to legislative matters.
Right. So that's true. So you wouldn't be you would vote, and it would then move on to legislative matters. As long as it's whenever it's done at the Disability Commission. I'm not sure when their next
Our Disability Commission, which I did say today, it's on November 10th at 4 o'clock, in which I had already talked to Councilor Nash at the first meeting that he had, that I would get it set up. But like I said today, what had happened was the ADA coordinator didn't realize it was a holiday weekend and we were supposed to go through this whole ordinance, our commission. So now it's booked for November 10th.
Terrific.
It's on the agenda. Everybody has the ordinance.
Great. Then we'll refer it there. So it would be there on the 10th, and then you would vote on the 16th, and then it would be at council on the, no, then it would go to legislative matters. Councilor Dwight.
When do we have to send the report in, Councilor Scheer?
So a report is just the vote. You know, what constitutes a report in our rules is that when we refer something to a committee, one of our subcommittees, that they take a vote on a recommendation. So that would be the vote that Community Resources would take, and then it would be the recommendation that the Disability Commission would take. That would constitute the report.
Who are we sending our recommendation to?
Laura, I guess however we.
The council, the recommendation you're making to the council, and I want everyone to understand, we're not going to be addressing this on the council floor until the middle of December, just so we're clear. And that will be the first time it comes with, hopefully, out of all the committees, if all the committees are able to move it further. So I would be very reluctant to agree to a 30-day extension beyond that and bring it into January, because we don't even know if there's going to be a plan in January. So I'm just saying.
So remind us, when is the next legislative matters meeting that falls after the 16th?
Let's see. I'm looking. December 14th.
Yeah.
Okay, so it would be on December 14th at Legislative Matters. So exactly as Councilor Dwight said, it would be at council on December 17th.
That's going to be the first reading on that?
Yes.
That would be the first reading, yes. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, so we're going to take a roll call on suspending the council rule requiring reporting within 60 days. And also we're going to refer 20.114 to the Disability Commission.
Okay. Councilor Scherer.
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe.
Yes.
Councilor Dwight.
Yes.
Councilor Foster.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Councilor Nash.
Yes.
And Councilor Quinlan.
Yes.
Okay. That those rules have been suspended and it has been referred. I know of no other business. So is there a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn?
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Maori, seconded by Councilor Thorpe to adjourn. Laura, roll call please on adjourning.
Councilor Thorpe.
Yes.
Councilor Dwight.
Yes.
Councilor Foster.
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Councilor Nash.
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan.
Yes.
And Councilor Scherer.
Yes, we are adjourned.